Oh, yeah.
All right, welcome everyone. It is May 19th, 2025. This is our 9 a.m. strategic planning meeting. Please let the record reflect. Here in the conference room, we have Commissioners Jordan, Waldrop, and Kearns. I believe we will be joined shortly by Commissioner CUNY online. So we are going to start off today with Jeff McMorris, and we're going to talk a little bit about Spokane County budgets.
Jason's actually gonna start going over the monthly sales tax.
All right, take it away.
Good morning. So April sales tax collections came in, and that's based on the economic activity of February. So looks like it's a little bit lower than we projected. So it came in at 5.3 million. The year-to-date collections are at 24.6, which is 1% over our forecast. So year-to-date, we're still over our forecasted amount. So that's pretty good. If you go down to the actual versus prior year, right now we're 2% over last year, or 2.15% over last year's actual collections. And then you'll see on the graph at the bottom, we do like the rolling 12-month average. You can see 2 years ago, our rolling 12-month average was 6.2% growth. Last year at this time, it was 1.4% growth. And then this year, we're at 1.1, so it dropped a little bit. So we take the 12 months average amount, we're at 1.1% over the prior year's actuals. The next slide. And here we have the subsector, or sorry, the economic sectors. So using the NAICS codes, accommodation and food services year over year, we're down about 0.5%, so relatively flat. February was not quite as much of a drop as the prior year. Construction, see, in January, we had a really good January. February was decent, but year over year, we're 8.5% over for the construction sectors. And then for retail trade, which is our largest one, the one that we watch most closely, we're down about 1/3% over last year, year to date. Next slide. So one of the things about the construction sales tax revenue, so construction is a leading indicator, being so infer 9 to 12 months forward what revenue collections will be the economy. So the American Institute of Architects, they have their billing, we talked about before. The past 27 out of 30 months have declined in billings. So that doesn't look very promising, but locally, our sales tax revenue growth for those subsectors still up. So non-residential building is up about 11.6%. Residential building up 8.9%. And then we put in a new subsector, building equipment contractors, year over year is up 29%. And building equipment contractors, sounds a little bit misleading. It's things like HVAC businesses, plumbing businesses. So whether they're doing business in someone's home or if they're building out like large building space, we don't really know, but that subsector is doing pretty well. Next slide. We have the accommodation and food sector sales. So full service restaurants, so restaurants like Finger Daggers, Churchill's, we get food and liquor. It's up 6.5% year to date. Limited service restaurants or smaller eating establishments like Qdoba's, things like that, up 2.7% year to date. Drinking places down 5.2% year to date, which I was gone on vacation part of February. That impacts it much. I wouldn't have anticipated that, but
You're just doing well.
I do it really, really well. Yes. So hotels, motels, so we put that back in. That is year to date up 16.1%. February was exceptional. So it was like
We
probably
did-
a great Valentine's Day for a lot of people because February was up 46%.
We looked like there were quite a few events at the podium that month, which would have brought in a lot of hotel motel, convention center had some things. So
Yeah.
we did a little looking and that.
Then March should probably be even
We had the
just as good
women's,
with all of the volleyball and the
Yeah.
basketball too.
so it's one bright spot on the.
I mean, next month we should see good stuff too.
Those really, it was a great month that. Next slide. And then automotive sector, it looks pretty rocky for most of the subsectors, with the exception of new car dealers. So year to date, new car dealers are up 16.1%. And we anticipate that going for the next probably 2 months to jump up a good amount as people try to avoid some of the tariffs by purchasing like larger purchases early. So that'll probably go up. Used vehicles down about 10% or 9.5%. Other motor vehicle dealers like RVs and boats down 6.3%. And then auto repair and maintenance up 3.4% for the year. Last slide. So just to recap, so year to date, we're 1.2% or about 250,000 over what we budgeted for 2025. And we're about $500,000 over our actual collections for the same period for 2024. It's the same graph you saw earlier, but are showing what we're projecting, and our historical, just as a reminder, our historical average growth rate is 3.9%, but we're still trending right now just at 1.1. So, and at the bottom part, last week, the New York Fed came out with their quarterly report on household debt. And for the first time in a while, surprisingly, like I was shocked. It was not terrible. So the rates of people transitioning into serious delinquency has leveled off. So it has been for the past several quarters cratering, but it seems to have leveled off. And credit card balances and auto loan balances fell from the previous quarter, which is only the second time that's happened since 2011. So super surprising.
Based on where we are after 2 months, if we annualized it, we'd have just shy of the 2 million mark. That would make us status quo to last year's budget, 2 million, the balance of 25 budget. We'd be bringing in about 1.6 probably, 1.5, 1.6 for our comparison year over year.
That's the difference on the gap that revenue would make.
Correct.
Okay.
We'd be bringing in a little over 1.5 million more, because we borrowed 2 million, or didn't borrow, we used our savings account for 2 million to start at 0 this year with a true status quo budget. We'd need this to increase by 2 million. We're a little over 1.5.
But I think also to Commissioner Jordan's point, if that were to hold, that then change our trajectory on our sales tax that we're projecting out could have some positive gap closure next year's. Yeah.
We were bottoming out. Questions on this?
I think we're good.
So then it's gonna be Ashley and Dan. We're gonna go over the risk account we discussed last week briefly. Our liability account, working risk comp accounts, and start discussion. We recommend that we need to add some money to the balances. But obviously a range of options there that we'd like you to start considering. We don't necessarily need an answer today, but within the next couple of weeks, we actually do, because the build out budgets county-wide. We need to know where you guys think the best spot is.
So Dan's gonna run through the both workers' comp fund and liability to make sure that we have all of the information that would be helpful for you guys as we're starting to make these decisions. We have gotten the actuary report, which is where a lot of this material comes directly from, which we get every year. And so he's gonna run through those two funds, and then in the event that you wanted to see what had been recommended for the last 5 years versus what the county has taken, we have that data available as well.
So, first slide there, workers' comp fund, we can advance one. So this is just a solvency perspective that the actuary does all the way back to 2015. You can kind of see the line. The green bars, that's a 1 in 20 year event. So that's where we would like to be in the event that we have something. So the bottom part of that green bar is a 1 in 20. The top end is if we had 2 events that occurred. So primarily we'd like to be kind of in the middle of that. Yeah, that's kind of how that shows. And you can see the trending line has moved down over the years. We haven't been funding to what we would like to be. And we'll show you, I think it'll be good at the end, we'll show you what has been recommended by the actuary and actually what's been taken, what the county has implemented as that goes. If you go to the next slide, it shows the projected ultimate losses for the accidents for 25 and 26. As you can see, there's a trending line there of about a 7% annual growth every year in the workers' comp as far as claims and accidents go. A lot of that's driven just by wage increase and then also just cost in medical inflation. It's not getting cheaper to cover these costs. All right, next slide. There's a funding option, which is the middle option that the actuary has, which is a 5% rate increase. You'll see there that the budgeted contribution to the fund balance only puts in about 250,000 over and above what we're looking at for the total costs. So it's total contribution at 5% would be about 4.5 billion to that. If we go to the next slide, it shows how that breaks out for the different class codes in the workers' comp at that 5%.
You can do more, you can do less.
Yep.
In the appendix, there's a 10% slide. They had a 0, a 5, a 10. The 25 budget assumes a 5% increase. So on this fund, I'd say we're recommending the 5% is what we budgeted for. This fund would stay in a good place.
Still doesn't get us to a place where if we have a couple 1 in 20s.
Right.
That we will be solvent, so
Yeah.
keeping that in mind, which is why taking a 0 is probably not a good option for us. We recognize that we would be recommending a 10%, but knowing what's happening with budgets in future years, that's why we're recommending that middle option of a 5%. But again, if we have a couple of really big claims, we are underneath where we need to be from a solvency.
We'd be back mid-year seeking some additional funds.
All right. Property and liability fund 507. So that first slide kind of shows the same thing. For a while there, starting in 17, we started ticking up, right, with our fund, and we were above where we wanted to be as far as the green bars. And then we started having some larger claims. We also cost, right? So insurance costs, all that kind of stuff really skyrocketed. Property, I believe it was in 22, 23, there was like a 40% increase in property for insurance. So we've just seen huge spikes in the insurance costs. It's not just through the risk pool, it's also our commercial through Gallagher, right? So all those costs are increasing dramatically. We talked a little bit about, the pool is we're expecting the pool
to suggest, you know, a 25 to 30% increase for 26 for cost for insurance. So yeah, we're trying to prep for that. But same thing, the upper bound of the green is a 2 in 20. The lower bound is a 1 in 20 event. We've had unfortunately a couple of those events the last couple of years that have hit the coffers kind of hard. And but right now we're projecting downwards at a pretty steep rate. And we want to curb that. 25 is a little unique in the sense that we do have a $7.2 million prepaid insurance for 25 because Pool used to run insurance from October to October. And so to try and get in alignment with county budgets, we did a stub year last year and paid 1.7 million of the stub year. So the last 3 months of 24, which then gave us a break for 25. We don't pay again until 26. But that 7.2 million is baked into these numbers, right? It's assuming that we're not spending that and we're moving forward in 26 with that 7.2 to assist this fund. So that if you read in there and that's what it's talking about, that's what we the pool did try to get into the county's fund or budget years so that it's easier. We're not guessing. Because we used to have to kind of guess what it was going to be, and now it will align correctly. Moving into the next slide, it's just again the projected claim loss for 25 and 26. As you can see, it's a pretty steep incline, and they are not getting any less expensive. They're averaging probably a growth of about 16% over the next 2 years. Payroll grew by 10%. That also, you know, that folds into all of this, but the claims are growing, unfortunately. The next slide just shows an estimated future payments for 25 and 26. There is on 25, you'll see the lighter colored line on top that has to do with the juvenile detention claims that have come in. That would assume that those all would come mature in 25, which isn't going to happen. Talked about how those are kind of lingering. Some are gaining some ground, but this is the projection if we had to pay out everything today because everything came matured. This is what we'd be paying. So, the next slide is what the middle line or what the funding option number 2, which is a 49% increase. And that just that doesn't get us to 0. That still leaves us 1.2 million behind our goal of getting up to that 1 in 20 year funding level. So that keeps us behind, unfortunately, on that funding.
And that equates to about $4 million.
Yeah. So if you go to the next slide, this
Can you
little
pause on that? Can you just
Yeah.
clarify, Jeff, I'm just trying to match up the numbers there with what you're saying and I'm not understanding.
The general fund portion of that would be a $4 million increase.
Of the 14,
Correct.
okay.
So there'd be other funds that would fund it.
Yeah, so if you go to the next slide,
Oh, okay.
the next slide, it's obviously hard here, but this would be the general fund side, right, at 49% and how that would affect it. And you could see at the bottom. Go ahead.
I can't see it.
Oh. It's about 8.7
Your eye
million.
test, right?
Yeah, I just failed, sorry, but it's about 8.7 million.
Okay.
Right? That's at the 49%. That would include that $4 million addition. And then the next slide would be all other funds. And that's at just over 6 million.
So, Stan, if you could, you talked about a 4 million, there's an 8 million. So what was the number for that we budgeted for this year? I'm presuming it's 4.7 thereabouts, right? Okay.
Yeah.
That's what we budgeted for. This is what the additional amount would suggest we need to move the fund to, right?
They presented a 0 increase option, which I don't think would be wise.
Who's they?
The
Actuary.
actuary. And then this 49% is the middle option, and they also have a 62% increase option. You can certainly make a fiscal case for the 62, however, balancing everything that needs to be balanced. I think this should be within consideration. You can do less if something were to happen. We would need to take from fund balance whenever that happened. So like workers' comp, I think is a much easier,
Right.
we can just go status quo.
It's not as
there.
volatile.
But this
as
one,
liability.
this is a pretty big chunk of money. It's an additional hole in our current budget situation.
If you advance to the next. Past the thank you and one next.
Oh, yeah, I was just asking, so have we been underfunding just the general?
Yeah, this
fund?
is.
The next
Oh,
slide will
okay.
show.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Sorry.
Yeah, and
Reading through.
It's in the
One more.
appendix.
That one. So these are the funding options of a 5-year history. So the actuarial option 2, right, is the middle ground. The option 3 is the break-even points for the actuary. And then the third line is what the county has implemented over those 5 years for both worker comp and property. So you can see over those 5 years, we've been underfunding and sometimes even under the option 2. So it just keeps putting us further and further behind that goal of the 1 in 20. And the actuary did actually make a trip over here this year because they were very concerned about how we're projecting downward so steep in the property and liability. Not so concerned with workers' comp, but very much with property and liability.
And I think it's important to note, looking at 2025, right? The option 2, not even the break even option, was recommended at a 63%, and we took 30%. So we have gotten behind, to Dan's point. But this last year, we've gotten pretty severely behind, and we continue to see higher and higher litigation costs, higher and higher awards. And so from a solvency perspective, that's why we're here, to make sure that you all have a full understanding of what's happening with that fund. Additionally, in the event that we ever needed to go to a self-funded model for some reason, we are currently not in a position where that would be a transition that would be all too attainable. So as we project for future years and look at a 5-year strategic timeline, in the event we had to move to a self-funded model, we are not set up for that right now, which is why we're recommending this year we at least take the middle option to hopefully start moving our trend line from not such a steep decline. We're still not hitting break even in our recommendation, but again, recognizing the budget situation we're in, we're hopeful we can at least start climbing out of the ditch a little bit instead of digging it down a bunch more feet below us.
We're by far the largest county in the pool. So we're a bit of an outlier in the pool. At some point, we may be invited to go self-insured.
Yeah, graduate. Yeah. And it would make sense because again, there are parts of the pool we are really not utilizing because of our high deductible of 500,000. And so a lot of claims aren't hitting that. So it's all county money, right, being spent. But if we were to move to a lower deductible, it just means our premium's going to increase dramatically. So at some point it would make better sense, probably like we said, in the next 5 years or so, moving to that self-insured status.
Question. So just a reminder, so the 4 million is in addition to that said projected.
And so, yeah, the rest of that number was already baked in, but roughly 4 million would be taking us from a 20 million nut to a 24 million nut.
And then just to remind me, this fund is helps cover anything that the risk pool doesn't cover for the reasons. we talked about with the
It's
deductible.
it's liability, it's also on property. So it helps with our SIRs, right? And then
Which is,
our self-insured portion.
okay,
So our deductibles, like automobiles, we don't we're not covered for passenger vehicles. We pay that 100% out of county pocket, right? So all the damages that could be done to county vehicles, sheriff's vehicles, all that kind of stuff, that's all paid out. The pool covers the liability if there were injuries. We cover the damage on that. Big equipment is covered by. They don't do automobile coverage. Yeah. So there's those things. On that.
Commissioner CUNY, you have a question?
Yeah, I guess, a couple of questions. It's like, so the page further back that showed by department, the fund, is that getting us to where we need to be? I guess I'm
No.
kind of confused.
No, that's still leaving us about $1.2 million short of where we would like to be,
Of a break even.
of a break even point.
Okay, so I guess for me, the slides aren't showing me like, what is the final decision? This is percentages, it's not numbers. So it's like, so where's the ability for me to look at how much do I need to take out of fund balance? Because we know that we can't charge all of these at this point in time. If we're going to take a big chunk, we're not going to be able to charge each of the departments because they're not going to have the money in their budget. So to allocate it, an extra $1 million to the sheriff's office when the sheriff's office is already at a deficit, when, most of these departments are already, trying to figure out where they're at, and we're asking them to hold where they were from 2 years ago. I guess I'm just trying to figure out what do we, if we fund this, which would have to come out of fund balance, what are you, how are we doing that, I guess? And then, how does this feed into that? Because I guess I'm, when I look at some of these numbers, from our funding history, how we dropped, we've been at 5%, it looked like, for the most part, and how we let that trend line get so far down when we know that Washington's a high liability state for lawsuits. So I mean, we've got to get it back up. I mean, in my mind, there's no other alternative. We have more population. There's just more things that happen. There's more lawsuits that happen. So I guess I'm just trying to figure out, where are you anticipating? How are we anticipating this happening? And like I said, I don't think we're going to be able to charge us all back. So when we look at this and say it's going to come, this is what's coming out of the general fund, but it's going to get charged back. I don't think we can do that at this point in time when we're already asking departments to take further cuts. When this wasn't something they were anticipating, this was a management decision that occurred without the department head's knowledge, I think.
So I think kind of roundabout answer your question, Commissioner CUNY. So that slide 12 that's on the screen right now is what the actuaries provide for us and kind of show department by department what that split would look like. I hear what you're saying from if the commissioners decide to use fund balance, we would likely need to figure out what current status is with those numbers and then probably continue to charge current status to the departments potentially. Or Tessa's shaking her head. Nope.
One department in the general fund pays the liability bill for the entire general fund. It is only allocated after the fact via cost allocation. So it is not a direct impact to each department's budgets, with the exception of detention services, where we do have it budgeted for within their budget. So it can be charged out to our contracting jurisdictions more easily.
Hearing what Commissioner CUNY is saying, I've got a couple ideas that we can chat about afterwards to be able to come back and show slides, what the actuaries recommended, what did we budget for, so we can see the difference that potentially is being requested for the board to consider. So I think there's another way we can slice it to take the percentage and show dollars on theirs as well. So.
Is the 49% increase enough in the realm of what you guys think we should be considering, that we crunch all the numbers based on that? Are you guys thinking less or more?
And is the 49% increase the 8.7 million, or is,
This slide represents a 49% increase, which would be about 4 million over what's currently baked into the budget.
And it's this slide and the other one, Commissioner Cutie. So there's two slides. There's the general fund slide and then there's the other fund slides. So it's not just one of these slides that gets to that 14.
It's hard to show because there's so many line items. It's not an easy way to.
right? Well, and if I go back, on the other funds, I mean, again, do they have capacity or does it need to come out of the capacity of the general fund balance?
We'd have to research that as an option.
I mean, I think those are things we need to know as we look to say we're gonna, again, in my mind, just one commissioner, we need to get these numbers up. I mean, this is almost, this is not good. Because it's gonna come out of fund balance one way or the other, and we could have already spent more fund balance and not have money to even be able to handle these. So we know we need to do something. But I need to know kind of where do we anticipate these funds coming from and who's got capacity or who doesn't have capacity to handle it.
Well, do you want to see it as what a flat would be to each agency and then how the rest hits the general fund? If we assumed.
I think this is again one of those things where we need to know what is the total amount that we think may hit our fund balance. Because when we get into the separate funds, we're not supposed to have one fund benefiting another, but the general fund can fund the other funds. And so we need to look at what that really looks like, that we're potentially proposing, and what that fund balance looks like for us as a whole with other anticipated needs out of the fund balance. Because this is almost our whole gap in our, revenues and expenses for next year, correct?
Adds to it, correct.
So, oh, go ahead, Scott.
I would just kind of further from what you were saying, Commissioner, we could take these two sheets, collapse some of the internal numbers, just show the allocated costs, show what a zero base would be and show a difference so that we can see by department activity and fund what the delta would be, and the commissioners could be able to at least have some sort of an opportunity to say, yes, fund balance, fund those, no, those funds can fund those. So I've got an idea in my mind on how that could work. And quite honestly, it might not, that's going back to it's only four-ish million is only break even. Going back to our original, I'm sorry, it's not break even. If you go back, we have about another 1.2, 1.6, 1.2 to get to break even. And so I think showing some of the activities through the fund pluses and minuses, I think could help show that a little more. And maybe it's not a 4, maybe it's a 5.2 that we have to consider.
Well, and again, to me, these are, this is just part of operating costs that we need to be paying attention to. And just like other departments where costs are going up and we have to figure out how we fund them. These are operating costs that are costs of doing business as a county that we don't have a choice. I know other counties, with, other risk pools, the risk pool, costs are going up huge. This is just part of our operating costs of doing business that we've got to figure out how we fund.
Well, today we just wanted to provide the information so that it was something to have on your radar as we continue to have conversations. So I think to Scott's point, work with budget, provide in another meeting, the way that you guys are asking to see this, but we just at least wanted to make sure it was on everyone's radar as we're having more conversations about 2026.
Are you guys good with the 5% on the workers' comp first one? Or do you want more info on that also?
That's more
Seems
straightforward.
straightforward, yeah.
That's our opinion too. It's the liability one we need to the effort into. So we'll move forward then at the 5% on the workers' comp. We will put some numbers to the percentages and look at impact to individual agencies, departments, and bring it back.
Can I just ask one more clarification? You showed like 16% growth estimates yearly expected in terms of the expense.
Yeah.
So the 49% is partly kind of a catch up from past efforts, and then also a kind of look forward to the growth as well. Okay.
Some of this is also, we made a decision a couple of years ago to swipe all of our interest income to the general fund. So these funds just redirect. Yeah, change a process. But that interest income generated from this fund used to stay in the fund. So that's also a piece of some of the white. It's about 2.4 million. Would have assisted. So when we started doing that, about the time we had a couple very large cases that went against us, so that kind of hindsight's a bit more 2020 as than foresight, so just the way some of the numbers worked out there. I think it was a bad decision, it's just.
Anything more on this topic? Okay, thank you.
Well, next, you guys all received the budget letter last week. Without. Okay, so we have received no comments back yet. That's what we were hoping to gather any feedback that we can make some edits and changes. And then work on getting that out over the next couple weeks to our departments.
If you have suggestions, throw them out.
Well, I had a couple suggestions on the first paragraph. Do you want to give the estimated budget deficit amount in that paragraph? And the target budgets on the second page, that was just kind of confusing to me. Your 2026 target budget is, but since your budget does not include, you'll need to reduce expenses by 7%. Is that included in the target budget? Or do they have
Our
to do their own math?
challenge has been, we had
I would be confused if I received that.
at our last leader up, where we had most department heads present. I thought I was being very clear because I understood myself. It was clear that if you had $1 million budget last year, you'll get $1 million budget this year. But COLAs, step increases, salaries are going up as well as just inflation on everything. So you can't do as much with that $1 million. And you know, if you're 100% salaries, you're at least gonna have a $70,000 increase on the 7% benefit salary. So you'd have to cut 70,000 in expenses to keep all those same people hired. We actually did a model budget, which in my opinion reinforced the point. But then having some one-off conversations with elected and department leaders after that meeting, realized people were expecting their target budget to include the COLA wage benefit and that they would only be bringing forward a new program, a new idea. And they only want to do small ones of those. And so feeling the need to say, if your 25 budget was $2 million, we want to clearly say what that dollar amount is. To drive home the point, there's not an increase for COLAs and benefits. And unless you cut something, there is no room for even a small new idea. It's only gonna cost 25, 50,000 unless you find it in your current 25 budget as a cut. So this is the budget office team. We've gone around and around in this language, trying to make it painfully clear. A flat budget is $1 million last year, is $1 million this year. However, on average, benefits go up a lot, and that's out of our control unless we have to cut our benefits. It's offered, and on average, you know, with steps and COLAs, it's about a 7% increase. You're gonna have to cut somewhere to absorb that 7%, unless you had enough discretionary in your budget already to absorb it easily. We have departments that don't have 7% M&O, that their payroll is 94% or higher.
So I think maybe just incorporating something that says we are aiming for a flat budget. And then somewhere in the first page, you know, because you don't really clearly state that. And then in the second page, you could say your 2026 target budget is this amount in parentheses,
Same as 25.
same as 2025. That would make it more clear. And then the second bullet then makes sense. Like you're gonna have to reduce expenses to meet that because of the increased cost of benefits and wages.
We're gonna hit the subject again tomorrow at the elected leader department head monthly Zoom call. Just to try to reiterate it as we meet with more and more departments and discuss next year's budget. You know, that one-on-one, face-to-face, get a better idea whether we're actually communicating effectively or not. And so I think we are getting that reality across to people.
7 times, is that what they say?
Sometimes 7 different ways.
7 times communicate before.
Before it sinks in.
And I think one of the approaches that we've discussed is these target budget letters would be going to individual departments. People hear flat budget and oftentimes they don't get directly translated to what that means to them. So we want to be really explicit. The recommendation is to be really explicit in spelling it out. Here is what it is.
So they don't make that assumption that inflationary pressures are put in.
I think, so what are you wanting them to provide back to you by August 1st? What, like a narrative of what the cuts? I mean, I know as a board member, I would appreciate, you guys need the dollars and the cents to start building it in your system. But I mean, maybe we can get ahead of some presentations that come to the board, you know, from different departments like we did last year. They should probably create a narrative of what the cuts would be, like eliminating this position, eliminating that
And I've
position.
encouraged that to the
And
ones
then
I've
what
talked
the
to.
impact on their work would be, or the work of the county, you know, so we can understand. Like,
That impact is, and that's how I explain it to them when we have the one-on-ones. Is like, when they say we just can't do it, they go, we need you to mathematically do it. Explain what that impact would be. Because then when the board, if there's more revenue at the end created somehow, somebody else gets cut, there's tax increases, whatever that is. They need that narrative to make the decision on what's a priority to find out. So we need them to,
so do you
Do
have
what?
like do you have like a template or a worksheet for them to fill out to then submit? And then, so that could be used and save time later.
they'll actually also
Or-
put it in online.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, they'll submit, yeah, everything online, but yes, we also typically collect some type of paperwork that they complete. So I think
That's
knowing
what-
from board members what topics you'd like outlined by departments, so we can be as clear in a request for information from them, will be helpful, because sometimes that's where departments can struggle as well, is writing up, you know, as much as we can write these letters, how to communicate something very clearly doesn't always translate well, so
I thought like last year. I'm just remembering some of the budget presentations. I thought that the clerk's office, the assessor, they said, this is how much we would cut, this is the dollar amount, this is the impact. You know, like I thought they laid it out pretty well. It would, you know, we'd have to eliminate this position at this cost. This would be the impact, like a paragraph just describing the impact to the workload of any required services of the county.
I think we had a third bullet point on the second part there. It's explaining how any of the cuts you're proposing fiscally would have to work.
I think that may take the place of that second bullet. I think that was our intent, was to get a narrative of what the cuts would be, but for some reason, we were hanging on to the word supplemental, because I don't think we're gonna have room to give beyond.
I think the supplementals are going to be if there are dollars.
Right, like
Maybe
if you
you
have a
don't
department of
always
2
need-
people and you have to eliminate a person,
Yeah.
that's something we're gonna have to consider. Is should, you know, if there is there a cut somewhere else and we keep that individual, or, you know, depending on what the work is being performed.
As I say, some departments don't have 7% of the cut everything.
Right.
Besides that. And that's not realistic to not buy some paper and pens.
So I just, if there was like I don't know if we can work on that.
But we can work on that
Like a
and
little
just send it
template where
around.
They fill in some narrative for the board.
We'll work on that and send it via email to you guys to.
It makes, I get what you're trying to do with supplemental would be the narrative for the cut. However, I think it makes more sense to do them separately, because there might be some cuts that they this might be wishful thinking that they might make a cut and say, we don't need to request that back because we've reorganized or we figured out a better way to do it. So it doesn't, I would like to see it broken out where the cuts are
Separate
described,
streamlining
separate
versus
if you're
challenges.
requesting, then justify that as well. I don't know, that's just the way I think about it.
We've seen it a few times.
Well, didn't the assessor cut not fill a position last year, but then ask for some dollars towards a shared position or something? A tech position with the IT. So like, I think, yeah, maybe having another way of providing a service that's at a reduced cost, right?
Reduce costs and provide the same services are different than cuts that reduce services.
Right. Or we're gonna share the employee with this other department. So it cuts the cost in half for both departments, something like that, you know. So having an opportunity to at least submit something that might seem like a new budget line, but it's actually a reduction from what was previous. Do we follow it? Sorry if I missed this, but I remember Commissioner Kearns, you had mentioned that we had done like a survey in the past when you first came to the county.
Yeah, it was like a Survey Monkey, I think was the platform we used, and just kind of asked folks, do you have ideas for cost savings measures,
Send
efficiencies?
that around to everybody,
Okay,
the responses from the last
Oh, good.
the last round, so that'll be like 3 weeks ago in your inbox. We did it shortly after the last meeting. Yeah, that wasn't last week's meeting. That was the
No.
meeting prior to that.
We'll
I would
probably have
recommend
that.
you peruse through that.
Yeah.
Before
I mean,
making
people
a
are-
decision.
I mean, how long did you have for people to?
No.
Oh, this survey was 2000.
These are the
This is from a
answers.
survey. There's a lot of,
Sorry, I thought you meant you put out a new survey. You already had responses. Okay.
there's a lot of people that had ideas for other departments. Let's put it that way.
But they got it.
Well, you know, it's always easy to see how other people can save when you're not part of it.
Quite
I'd
frankly,
say-
sometimes that's how you get the best ideas.
So I would recommend, we can resend it around again, we put it at the top of your box. If you guys could take a look through that, I think that could inform decisions moving forward.
The reason I thought of it was that when you're sending this letter out, maybe you could talk about or follow up after it with a survey, you know, if there's, I don't know, but I know we have to look at this one to see if it's worth That's what you're suggesting, we look at the responses to see if we're doing it,
I
okay.
think it'll inform on what you view as value of a survey.
And we are still working the concept with Pat and his team of a survey that is kind of more universal, external and internal, not specific just to internal departments, but kind of one survey fits all approach later in this process, closer towards September.
Who did it come from? The.
I sent it.
I think it was ten.
Came from Tessa.
So we did, yes, we've talked with Pat and team, we're ready functionally to put out a survey. If that's the will of the board. We have some ideas on that process. Just encourage you to read through last results.
Came out on April 21st, so it was.
I just had a couple other, you might want to say an area for consideration, I don't know if this is. But on that same note of like sharing a position or working with another department to. On shared costs or positions. I don't see that specifically in there.
Yeah, I don't think it is. That's a good call out though.
And then the last bullet, transition to use of centralized services, the last sentence, I would make it more on the positive. You know, can be
Improve.
to increase efficiencies and reduce costs, right? Transition from your department to a centralized service department to increase efficiencies and reduce costs. It's just putting it in the positive.
Nice flux.
So we talk about target budgets by department. I think it's really important for. While this letter doesn't have to come from me, it can come from me, but if it comes from me, it's really important, I think, for the wording to be. These are coming, this is the direction from the BOCC. Oftentimes in the past, we'll have some departments that. Budget office told me this, budget office gave me this direction. No, this is the board's direction. So I think that's one point I wanna make and request that from the board. The second one is, it might be helpful, what our target would like to be for sitting out the budget letter by,
June 1st.
okay.
Hit your targets early, otherwise you never get.
Sooner than later, but
In June, for sure.
I think it would also be helpful for the board, for us to come back for the board and show, okay, when we say target budgets, the numbers that are gonna go in that letter, here is the general fund, department by department, last year's budget, what current year's target budget is. You may decide you want to do something differently in there, which is totally fine, and move some dollars up or down. I think having that in front of you so that you're seeing and it's clear that this is coming from this conversation as to what dollars are going to go in the budget letter, I think will be important.
We have talked about having the letter be accompanied by a short video from the chair and the CEO to try to. Sometimes when you read something and it's not as happy as this isn't happy, tone can be inferred, it's not meant to be there. So having a video message, kind of the empathy side, that we know this is challenging. That might not get read into this if you're just sitting reading these words by yourself. So that's another piece we talked with Pat and team about, doing to the chair and the CEO both said okay to that at this point.
Commissioner Keating?
Yeah, no, we talked about that and I'm still happy to do that because I do think sometimes having that little bit of, so people know that it is the board that is requesting this, that knows we're in a deficit, that we've got to figure out how we fund it. So it's going to mean tough decisions for all of us.
So what do we think is a timeline?
So if Ron, would you mind pulling up the timeline, budget calendar? real quick on the screen as well. It was provided in your packet this.
You know, I saw, was the letter listed on? Oh, it is.
There's a question.
Oh, question mark, yeah, so. So what do we think is a realistic date on this then? I mean, cause I think honestly that. From years past, the earlier we can get the requests out to folks, it means they have more time to. do
We're
this.
back before the board naturally, if you're okay with this calendar, on June 2nd. So maybe we can make that as a goal to just have final tweaks and then we get it out later that week. So I'll get it out the first week of June.
Think that's good?
I would like to see us shoot for getting the budget letter out in the second. The morning we do the final tweaks, we have the side by side to give you an opportunity to see if you want to make adjustments within those that can inform the letter. And if we can get a decisions there, we can have the letter going out by that afternoon possibly.
Are you and Commissioner CUNY gonna, do you want the video to come out as an attachment with the letter?
Ideally,
Like in the
yes.
same email, okay? Are you guys gonna be able to find time to film a video?
We'll make it work, with Pat
Okay.
and Commissioner CUNY.
Alright.
If you can scroll back up to the calendar portion, you'll see the turquoise dates would be when we've already been before you on these longer budget discussions like we're having right now. So you see the proposed Mondays going forward, roughly every other Monday. And then starting in September, it's weekly for the core of the budget season. And then that is capital requests would be due to the budget office.
By the end of June, so we're gonna try to separate a little bit our capital processing from our operating processing for the departments. So we were gonna also on June 2nd, send out an email to departments for capital submissions to start building our capital 6-year capital plan earlier in the months of July and August, so we can have discussions on that as soon as possible to get that out of the way. So September and October can be primarily focused on our operating budget decisions.
Did you want to include that in the same letter if you're planning on sending it out on the second?
We would keep it separate because that comes with a whole packet of kind of how to submit your requests and it's an Excel template that they can do, so we don't need it into our budgeting software. So we would send a separate email, but mention it in that one with the letter and stuff for departments, knowing that the action items for the operating budget letter would be coming. We're slated to go live with our new adaptive planning budgeting software tool the end of June. So June 30th is the green date there. That is the go for departments to start entering their budgets, and they would have the entire month of July and submit their operating budgets by August 1st. And then kind of have a blackout period in August where the budget office is reviewing all of the operating budgets and compiling and collating everything to present to the commissioners Tuesday, September 2nd. That is the statutory deadline, the first Tuesday in September, to share the rolled up operating budget for 2026. That's kind of an initial first glance. And then as we look farther into September, October, and November, we have gray dates in there for public hearings. So part of our budget process is 3 public roundtables where the public is offered the opportunity to come and engage and share input on the 2026 budget. And so we've tentatively selected some dates that we think could work really well for those hearings. So those are proposed currently as September 23rd, that is a Tuesday, October 14th, and then November 4th. And the topic of each roundtable is listed in the timeline as well. So we're not sure if, the board wants to weigh in on those dates, if those are bad dates for those meetings. They looked like routinely scheduled legislative agendas where the public can come in and provide input.
We do have some public notice requirements.
Yes.
And around them, so we need to.
Get those to Gina as soon as possible, so she's prepared.
Veterans Day is the,
Tuesday, the 11th,
just FYI,
that is a holiday.
so that would not be a. Okay, which is why you have something on the 4th there.
Yep.
Okay.
You may also want to, for consideration, with the increased pace of the strategic planning and budget meetings September, October. They want to be, have some consideration of mornings and afternoons in anticipation of the board wanting to hear from more departments than maybe traditionally in the past as to how they're going to achieve. And like the departments wanting the board to hear from them as well. So that's just something to throw out there for consideration, that these could get fairly broad conversations around a number of things, not only on the operating side, but the capital side too, because some of the capital does impact our operating budget.
So September, October, those, once we get weekly, if you could, to the best of your ability, not schedule them. Side, they could be more.
And that is because we just have a condensed timeline this year, with budget adoption being December 1st. That is the first Monday in December and also the first working day after the Thanksgiving holiday. So Thanksgiving is late this year, the 27th and 28th are county holidays. So to have everything provided to Gina, we're backing into the week of the 17th to have all of our documentation finalized and prepared for public noticing for the hearing on December 1st.
Do you, on the frozen hiring that we've already done, do you plan to come back and give us another kind of update on the status? What's the
We're hoping
time frame for
to-
that again?
Well, we're hoping to today, but as we work through workday and people are busy with other duties, we don't have everything uploaded today yet. So our next meeting with you, you will see an update on all of that.
And second question is, when you do the budget binders later, maybe they're electronic binders now, do you plan to show historical data in terms of FTEs by department and how far back? Because I expect that given the scale that we're asking departments to illustrate the cut, it's gonna be hard to avoid FTE conversations.
Yeah.
So we're gonna get narrative about the impact of that, which will be good information. I also think it will be good information to look historically, maybe even 10 years, 5-10 years back. What has been the FTE load for departments, so that we could kind of use that as comparing with what they narrate the impact to be.
Then our natural look back is.
We usually do 2 years prior current year, so 25, 24,
I think we need to go
23.
back further if we can. That's just my view.
It's five.
We'll get Jason working on
It's five good.
I wanna say as a part of last year's discussion, we had a grid that I think was 5 years.
it. Yeah, we
Almost certain.
at a roll-up level can provide 5 years quite easily. It's the department-specific levels that going back to 5 can introduce a lot of changes as reclassifications have happened or other things. So that can be a little harder to track at times for viewing it, but I think we could do 5. Oh, Jason just said, thanks for the work. I was very excited to get working on it.
I do, anytime, Jason, anytime, I do think we have something already.
Yeah, there was
So-
a grid, I think.
We can find them, we can go back, just a previous.
I think it's important as well.
You mean for
We have
just
piece
the
of historical
totals
trend.
of You mean just the total of each department or
I think we're talking by department, Chair.
Yes,
Like,
At the department level.
yes.
there were
But
3
not
commissioners
all-
in the commissioner's
not
office,
all-
and then
Not
One year
line,
there were
not
5.
line item positions,
Yeah.
that can be challenged.
It'd
that could be
be-
more challenging.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
total.
The commissioner's office has 10.
Yeah.
Not
Well, I
5
think the,
commissioners, 5
Yeah.
staff, a
Yeah.
clerk.
the way it's usually presented, it's departments and then by year, and then it has FTEs and then vacancies.
Yeah.
Oh,
FTEs,
right,
vacancies, FTEs, vacancies each year, so.
That we can very easily
Yeah.
accommodate a much longer look back
Okay.
on that data. We have that for sure.
Oh,
We're not going to the individual.
Per department
person.
by year, FTEs and vacancies, each department.
Yes, personally, I would like to see more than 5 years just to get like a pre-COVID. normal. But that's just, I don't know how much work that is and how hard it is to get that.
We have it back in 2019. I'm looking at a report that was from last year's budget. And so we already have it. So 19 through 25,
That'd be good.
Start pre-COVID.
pre-COVID, yeah.
Job security, Jason.
Whatever, Scott already found it. Yeah.
So is that timeline looking good? Does anybody have, out of town activities that we need to be looking around? We did look through the calendar we do every December, and we just look at the year in advance and try to catch if anybody had, conferences or something that things change, that's already 5 months old.
And the weeks that the board is in recess, we've already kind of factored into
Summer recess.
Oh,
this as well, yeah.
Yeah, that's the
Kind of
blackout for
the week
budget.
of July and then last week. Yeah, the 4th of July week and then the last week of July, the first week of August usually are blackout weeks.
The blue ones are weekly budget
The
discussion.
turquoise is like what we're doing right now,
Yeah.
yes. So if you find you have something, if you could let us know in the next couple of days, that would be great, and then we'll try to get this to Gina by the end of the week. That works with everybody?
Wasac meeting will it be back in Spokane this year?
I think it is.
Last year was in Vancouver.
Right. So.
Yeah,
that would-
when they do Eastern Washington, I think it's always Spokane. It's here, right, Mary?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they had already booked out with the grand, but we can double check that. Yeah, it's usually every other year. But I think 26 was already, or 25 was already booked for here.
And it's usually the week after the election, right?
Just the week right before Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
Second,
it's the week before Thanksgiving, usually.
That's why, when I was looking at the 17th, but I think that works because if it's here, we don't have to travel.
And that's the public hearing for property tax decisions on the 17th. Is what we currently have scheduled.
Normally we do that in the morning.
Yep, we can do that in the morning.
We'll double check.
I don't think the
Wasac for
Wasac usually
17.
starts till the evening of the next day here. People, it's a travel day to get to Spokane. And spend some money in Spokane.
Exactly, of our taxes, thank you, Wasac.
That's sales tax.
Anything else on the calendar?
Question, I assume we're still planning one of the evening hearings.
Yes, we were planning on one of these meeting every day.
We're open to suggestions on which one. Ideally, or typically in the past, when we've done one of them in the evening, it was the roundtable number 2 on expenditures. As the public can often provide more input on that compared to our revenue profile for the general fund. So that we've penciled in for October 14th, but open to conversation on that.
That's fine.
That's fine.
It's evening, like it's 5 o'clock, a good time for.
I think those are set at 5:30.
traditionally, it's 5:30.
Anything else on calendar?
No, I think it'd be good to do the one on expenses as the evening one, so I think that works.
guys put together a great calendar and you're really working ahead, so thank you. Keeping us organized.
That's all Jason. He picks out the pretty colors.
Okay.
So then you move on to the next one. Ashley, if you could join us, wanted to talk through FTEs as we've had this conversation a bit, just kind of wanted to see if we could pick an actual number. So as we move from PeopleSoft to Workday, as we're working on cleaning up FTEs, the budget office went through and pulled all of our current vacant positions. And then we ran them based on how long they have been vacant. After talking with Ashley, she suggested kind of 6 months, I believe, as an industry standard for how long you would leave something open if you're not even trying to fill it. So we went through, we have about 65 positions currently that have been vacant for 200 days or more. We just picked that round number, so you're almost 7 months with that particular look. We pulled it 10 days ago, so we're probably over 7 months at this point. Budget office went through our current job posting to kind of parallel between which of these 65 are currently being posted, trying to hire for. The HR office is currently double checking us to see if our assumptions were correct. But that would leave us roughly half of those positions are being posted currently to be filled. Half of them have been vacant for, at this point, 210 days or longer. And they've not been posted during any of that time to be filled. And so we would like to remove those out of the system. One other thing that we've started doing as we go through the attrition conversation here as natural vacancies occur, some groups have, a tech 1, a tech 2, a tech 3. They want all of those positions. So when a person moves from tech 1 to tech 2, there's an open tech 2. We can just change the position from tech 1 to tech 2. We don't need to have all of these empty positions sitting there. We've had 2 come through recently where the departments wanted to add an FTE, even though one had a dozen plus openings, the other had a couple dozen plus openings. Like, why don't you take one of your empty FTEs and reclassify it as this one? So we're just, standard practice is not to have random empty FTEs. I think our most outrageous cases since 2006, somewhere over 9,000 days. And so wanted to get board feedback on setting 6 months. If you're trying to fill it, that's a different situation. We can always put it back in if the world changes and they post it. But setting 6 months is kind of our standard as we move into Workday. If it's been vacant and not even attempting to post it, then at that point it would naturally drop out. And currently we would do it as we do this morph into Workday, which would be about 30 empty FTEs that fit this category, spread across, that's beyond the BOCC, that's separately elected, that's countywide that we're looking at these positions.
I'm comfortable with that. I mean, if they're not even recruiting for the position and it's just sitting out that the position exists, but if nobody even knows it's open, does it really exist? I mean, it's like, sure, let's get rid of my question though is the other thing you said. So you said half of these, they're not recruiting. How about the half that we are recruiting that have been open? You haven't been able to find someone in 6 months.
No, a lot of them
So-
are newer recruits, like I'm looking at one that so some of these on this list, they continually hold open.
Okay.
And so it will look like they've been recruiting since maybe 2024, but they continue to hold that position or the requisition open. So it's a consistent recruiting, like think of your sheriff's deputies, right?
Okay.
STAs, people like that. So it is a little bit of a.
But do we have any where it's there's one opening or two openings for a position and it's been open for 6 months. I mean, I get, if you're hiring for deputy, you got hundreds of
Detention
deputy
officers.
positions. I get that, but how about the ones where there are one, maybe two available positions? Do we have any of those that are open? And I will highlight Superior Court last year came in and said they were trying to hire for, I believe it was court reporters. And they said they had two openings that had been vacant for, I think they said 18 months when they came in last year. Somehow they've been able to function for 18 months without those two people. Do they really, should those positions really exist at this point?
It's kind of the same thing though. So they leave the court reporter open continuously because it is a difficult to fill. And so as they have attrition, they're just replugging people into those same positions that are turning as well. So
Okay.
like court reporter, sheriff, deputy, maintenance road specialist, engineer, technician 3, prosecuting attorneys, cooks, corrections officers. Those are the ones that we are continually seeing that are held open. And basically they're just backfilling as they're seeing the turnover. And so looking at the list that Tessa and Jeff identified, a lot of those are it's just a constant churn. So the position stays open because they're just backfilling as people are separating over and over and over again.
So those are the ones you would suggest leaving. then,
Yeah,
right?
so
Just
my-
understanding.
Yeah, and my past life looks a lot different. So I come from the private sector, and I will say when I came to the county, I was floored the way that we do our position management. It still boggles my mind, to be totally honest. So in my past life and everywhere else I've ever worked, and what systems typically do, if you're not using a bastardized version of PeopleSoft, you have a position open in the system if it's funded. You don't have a bunch of unfunded open positions that appear that we have positions to hire into, but there's actually no money that supports that. It blows my mind still, and I've been told lots of reasons why we do it in the county, but
Thank you
it's.
for that commercial. We would like to in
it
twenty
blows
twenty-six,
my
only include funded positions in our FTE count going.
Because it messes with, to Tessa's point, even just talking about how hard it is for us to pull lists and to show what's actually open and what's truly vacant, Josh, to your point. It's really difficult when you have these positions that are open that are unfunded. The other thing we see happening is departments are hiring into these positions and then going, oh shoot, we didn't have the money to do this. Now we're gonna steal from our M&O line to make up for the position because we don't wanna lose the person, right? So we're just not gonna spend as much on supplies or whatever it is. Which gets to a lot of your point lately, which is like, what are we really doing with our budgets, right? So I totally admit I come out of private sector where we very much manage our budgets differently and we all had bonuses at the end of the year, right? If we manage them well. But we're using PeopleSoft in a way that, in my opinion, from a systems perspective, we shouldn't be. And in Workday, we can't be. So in Workday, if you have a position, it's a funded position. You don't have unfunded positions in Workday. So to Jeff's point, we're asking to start making this transition now so that we can truly understand the positions we have in future state adaptive, which is the new Questica. When we're projecting budgets, when we're projecting increases, all of these things, we're looking at real headcount numbers that are funded and approved by this board, which is technically within your authority if you were to approve to the headcount level. So it's a different way of looking at things, but we're asking to at least start cleaning the system up at this point. In my past life, again, if a position, even if it was funded, sat vacant for 6 months and nobody tried to fill it, we would wipe it. Now, that's different probably than what's going to happen here, but at least if we can look at these unfunded and these positions to start getting things up, that's where my 6-month recommendation comes in.
And I would like to treat it the way we've started this year on the recovery of the salary and benefit line if it's not being used. If it sits for 6 months and it's not been filled, we would pull it out. Whoever's department that's in, they still have the money. So if they want to refill it later in the cycle, we can put it back in. If it was funded. But if it was, we were told in December that it was going to be filled, so the board funds it. And we get to June 1st and they have not filled it or even tried to fill it. At that point, we'd remove the FTE. So when you look at the next year's budget, you're actually looking at what they're working with. But it could be removed in a way that they still have that authority because it passed in the budget. They could put it back in October, but it would be pulled out. So when we did a poll, you would actually see how many people are working in XYZ department or are they trying to use? Is having FTEs that managers aren't even thinking about filling and throw off, in my opinion, the boards. We're not giving you the best material to make decisions with.
No, I totally get that. My only concern, are we gonna run into an issue for positions like, say, when Doug hires folks to work at the pool?
No, we will handle the seasonal.
Okay, that was the only thing, I mean, some of our seasonal are, I'm trying to think of what employees would sort of be the shortest seasonal, and I would think that would probably be
Yes,
like.
probably this-
I didn't even think of elections.
Yeah, so elections part, there's some public works groups, but we've already looked at this, so there's a
Okay.
different way of position management within Workday
Okay.
that we've identified for only a handful of positions to that point, that will allow us from a budgetary and an HR perspective to still fill the seats we need to fill.
Okay.
But they are truly like a seasonal, meaning you start on this day and you end on this day, non-benefited supplemental employee.
Okay, I just wanna make sure that doesn't sneak up on us.
So those are the four groups we talked about.
Yeah. Yes. I like the way you guys are headed.
I think then just having that historical knowledge, like that historical data that you were just asking for, Commissioner Jordan, like. Knowing where we used to be though is important, just for, as we plan for the future and working with the sheriff and then. The number of deputies we have now that we had 5 years ago, like where do we wanna go? What's the vision on that? We don't wanna lose that historical data, which is why I'm guessing. That was like one of the reasons to keep it in, I don't know, just like so we could see where we used to be, or I don't know why we kept it in.
Well, sometimes we hire somebody for a short term, it might be a year or two for a project, and then it just sits there.
Okay.
So sometimes, I just moved from one position a few months ago to another position and the old position just stays. Even though the board made a decision at that time not to replace the old position. So some of them are, if you find, Jim Amacio and he can tell you the stories, you can understand why you just have kind of this position. But then others are completely different stories and they should stay for whatever reason. I do think we
But
can.
we'll do
clean it
that
up.
review in the budget process, you review every year whether that position stays or is eliminated.
And I think I would say though, and I don't know if this is possible, we're gonna wanna make sure that we're showing you again, I would recommend the funded positions. So we keep looking at these positions, but they're not technically funded. So there are some departments that even from like a vacancy adjustment, okay, we knew we took these 10 positions in 2025 to make up the difference, it's a vacancy. For some reason at the county, the years and years of philosophy was, well, we don't turn those positions off and PeopleSoft, we leave them active. So it really skews your data because the board and the departments have said, okay, we normally have 250 positions. We agree we'll only have 240 next year, but 250 stay active. So when we're pulling historical data, it's really messy, to be honest, because we have not been cleanly managing our positions because there's, my understanding, been this fear of, well, if you take it, I'm never gonna get it back. So you can't take it, don't turn it off, which then has created just a lot of mess over there.
It leads to that kind of very challenging discussion that we had last year during the budget cycle of, is it funded, is it vacant, where did we start from, where are we going, where did we come from? How do we reconcile all these vacant positions with no funding compared to their budget? The target budget that we've set for them, was that inclusive of that or not? And kind of how we get there, it's very confusing, yes, and so hopefully, these steps will help us keep that in line a little bit better.
Just to play devil's advocate, I could see though, if I was the head of a department and I was asked to make a sacrifice for a few years in a downturn of the economy to keep a position vacant, but that puts pressure on the other positions to do, it may not be sustainable. So I can see where a department head would say, hey, I'm willing to make that sacrifice, but after a year or two, I'm gonna start losing other employees because the workload is unmanageable, so.
What I've done in my past life on that is that they put in a position request, right? And I'll use myself as an example. The compensation analyst is not in my department right now. I said, okay, let's eliminate it. I'm making a contribution toward the budget, right?
But if next year, or even if the end of this year, like we're drowning, I'm gonna put the request in and say, this is not sustainable for my department. I'm requesting this position and I'm gonna go through the appropriate channels to get that position back. That's how the system works as well. So Workday will allow you, if you're at that point where, okay, like we need to request another position, we put the request in and it goes to the appropriate channels to be reviewed and approved. We do it on paper right now, in today's world, for a new position request, so it just moves it in the system, but this is, I hear you, and I am directly impacted by that right now, but in the event that it becomes too much for my team, I would then put in a request and say, okay, I need this position back, and here's my business case for why I need it back, not just please flip it back on and I'm gonna steal from my consultant budget to pay for it.
And if it comes, something comes up mid-year, I think we just bring it forward mid-year. It's not, in my opinion, it wouldn't be, this is once a year during budget. And then nothing shall change until next year during budget. If the landscape changes and somebody brings a case, then we put it back. Put it back in. So,
Yeah, I'm just throwing that out because I understand the fear of never getting that position back, but the reality is we need to move towards more of a proactive business case. Make your case, explain that, you know, now you're losing all these, I'm just giving that as a
Oh,
for
I agree,
instance.
yeah.
You're starting to lose other employees in this, in the department because of
Yeah.
the workload is not.
we have to watch that.
Yeah.
People can suck it up for a while. If it gets too long, well, it's fine.
And if it's in the last couple of years, it's easy for any of us to see, yes, that position was right there. It was 10 years ago. Likely you don't need it. There's no reason to have to wonder or look back and say, oh, it was there 10 years ago, but recent years, we can see where the position was in there and now it's no longer funded, it's not there. So they can use that in their business case request.
I don't think it's crazy to think that you can come and request a position. We've added tons of positions. Like in my time here, a department head or an elected official comes in, they make a pitch, they tell us why they need the person. And I mean, we've added the clerk's office, I know we've given folks to, the assessor's office. I mean, it's not an extremely rare thing for us to add a
If it's in
position.
their current budget, they can just do it.
But there have
They
been
come
times
when they need the budget authority to cover the position.
and we've given positions. I mean, that's not something that. It's not crazy to think that, yeah, it's not unusual. I mean, it happens. It does. So. Sure.
Can we see the list? that
Yes,
you're talking about?
we'll bring it once HR does the final, so our next time before you,
Wow.
we'll bring a list of what was on.
Sorry, it was a busy week last week with some other stuff going on and I'm reviewing the list as quickly as I can.
So, what you're really talking about doing in the short term is removing 30-something positions from soft
So they
that are
wouldn't
not
get,
posted.
they have not been posted for a minimum of at this
Right.
point about 7 months.
But the question about really what you're talking about in terms of removing all unfunded positions is a larger universe of positions. To me, that needs to be a
As we move-
dialogue
Yes.
throughout the year and not something that's done quickly. My other thought is, generally speaking, it makes sense to me to communicate with the department heads and let them know.
Well, of course we
doing,
would,
Why
yes.
we're doing it, is there any feedback? So something that we're missing.
The reason I pulled the list before talking to you though, is departments can be really good about switching position numbers. If they have 2 of me, all of a sudden it's brand new. So I wanted to pull a list with static dates. So any of you out there listening, gonna do that, too late?
So one more question, if I could, for the new position request. If it's a budgeted position, how does that work? I've never seen, is that something that HR approves? Or I don't think it comes to the board.
No, so if it's budgeted, we have an internal process where the department heads or elected official fill out a form. They have to complete a business case to go with it though, right? So we're still doing the analysis to make sure that the position makes sense. From an HR perspective, the work is there, the class spec is correct, it's the right pay rate, all that. after we sign off on that from an HR perspective, budget reviews it to make sure it truly is within budget. And then we will, sometimes even now review it in our executive team meetings, to determine if, just another look, are we missing something? Is there another option? And then those will get approved. So, I will say in the last 6 months, those have relatively slowed down from most of our departments. There's a very small handful that still continues to put through a good handful of requests. But they are within their budgets and been able to maybe look at some other options to help offset. But that's another component, is when they are making requests, they have to roll their budget up to let us know where's that funding come from, how is it within. And then if it doesn't have the support or doesn't have the funding, like even a move from a 37.5 to 40 with a big group of people, you guys have seen those come in here, right? Where we've had to do some movement and there hasn't had to be requested fund changing because the department does not have the monies to support that.
And is the business case, is there any differentiation in that process between a department that we manage versus the independently elected?
Not for a new position, we still ask them to go through it, and that's from an HR perspective. We have to make sure we have the right position doing the right work, because from an EEO perspective, there's compliance things.
But there's a lot of deference, I would assume, to the elected if they've got the budget for it and they want to
Exactly.
manage their office.
We review them during our exec team, but we don't decline them, because as long as they have the budget for it, it's their authority, just good visibility so that we have that awareness. And I think it's good critical thinking as well for anyone to develop that, justify why the position is needed, what it does. But no, we only do the approval declining on the departments that roll up to the UCC.
My feeling, just from some budget conversations last year, is that with some of the elected offices, there's not that awareness or understanding about the unfunded positions. I think there's some belief that if it exists on paper, then it is funded.
It's one reason we'd like to marry those
Yeah,
up.
but there's an information gap that needs to be closed there.
We've
over the
closed it
year.
multiple
I thought we were
times.
aware of
I think we need
Okay.
to marry it up.
Okay.
We haven't
Sometimes
done 7 times yet, that's.
it's kind of like watching those political debates when the question's never answered, because that's not the point they want to make. I want to hire a new person. That's the road I'm staying on. Some of them are very good at those points.
I think they're generally aware.
Yes.
Commissioner Cuny.
Yeah, is there a way, again, just kind of understanding the departments and how many in each department and stuff is happening of these ones that you want to do that with? Because this would be kind of the biggest, it's kind of, I look at it, this is the lump sum that we're doing at this point, and then it should be less after that. Is there a way that we can see what that looks like? So
Yeah, we
by
bring that to you down to the exact position level. We're just doing the final cross-checking ourselves to make sure we have it accurate. So we would bring that list to the next meeting. We can even email it out beforehand once you have it ready, so you guys can look at it prior to. Yeah, we would not do this without you guys seeing specific detail down to the position level.
okay. I mean, because as you all know, we'll get calls from department heads. So we just need to understand, which departments and then, yes, understanding like in the sheriff's office and the detention services that we just have these open positions. And I think, yeah, having that discussion, what that means for which departments you're really thinking. I mean, I think you've
It's
kind
a
of talked about
broad
it. But it's
range
like
of departments.
Yeah, today we were concepting it with the board, and then we'll have the details of all those positions by departments next time we meet.
okay.
And the other thing I'd like to use it for in the future is if departments come in and say, we'll pay for this contract or cost with these positions, I would like to ensure that we are timely deactivating those in the system in the future. So that's the one other plug I'd like to put in. If a department commits to using positions to pay for things, I would recommend that we fix the system so that a few months down the road, people don't forget that they had given those positions up to pay for increases or things like. that.
Or any, trade-off they propose, we need a specific position identified.
Yeah.
To be able to
They
track
probably
that better.
actually come in with the position number. Cause sometimes they come in with a concept and then we never get the number.
Yes, well, and I was part of those conversations with one of the departments, but there's also reasons outside of just county reasons as to why you want to state things the way we're stating them, or you know, you can unfund it, but you don't want to delete the position for reasons beyond just what's going on in the boardroom.
Like detention had a lot of opens. Talked with Sparber, he talked with his team. We did remove, I believe, 8 detention positions. And you know,
That were unfunded.
they've been unfunded for you. There's still a dozen there. You know, I put it in email, so they have it in writing. If you actually fill everything that's unfunded and you have more options, let us know. We'll gladly hire detention officers. We need them. History tells us that we're not going to get all those filled. So let's right size that equation. And so that's what we already did, because it's a group that reports up through the board, be able to work with the department heads and do that. Kind of feel like we've reduced headcount, I think, at 42 right now since positions, sorry. Most of them were empty.
Vacant, unfunded.
I think 5 or 6 of them are actual attritions that were funded and were a person. I think
It's 5 or 6, I want to say, and it's just been, no backfill. Some of
yeah,
these
not backfilling attritions.
This
But-
year.
Correct.
Like Jeff's previous position, my benefit and comps analyst.
A couple people who've retired or shifted. And we'll have that for the next round too, that list. I kind of feel like what we can do at the staff level, we have done. And to move any further forward, we actually need a kind of a policy decision of the board one way or the other to stay where we are or make a shift with the move to workday. I really think we should make a shift, but that's a board final decision once you guys learn all the details and you guys will make a decision. Any more thoughts, comments on this one?
Just a question on the budget generally. So it seems like you would like us to move to getting rid of the unfunded positions. So the positions are correlated to what's actually funded. And then it seems like ideally you'd have a vacancy adjustment by department based on hiring or how many vacancies they actually have, right, on a yearly basis. But is the way that you've done kind of unspent salary clawback or pause or whatever you want to call it, is that
Recovery.
Good.
You're usually reminding me.
I need my second cup of coffee. Is that basically the same, doing the same thing? It's like ensuring that the budgeted salary goes to salary. But if
Correct.
it's not spent on salary, it doesn't get spent on other things.
Correct.
Okay.
Jason's a little bit of analysis of spending. January, November, December,
Yeah.
January, November, December. Sorry,
It's dramatic there at the end.
you talk with my hands.
And there are multi-pronged strategies that we're trying to incorporate that all kind of get to the same end result is if you've been able to operate without it, that should inform on a budget conversation with the board as to whether it's needed or not. Certainly there's some systems related not challenges, but the way the system is designed, that we want to bring our practices in compliance with the system, not adjust a system to meet our current core practices. So there's multiple prongs that we're trying to think about with this, but they all get to a cleaner budget, cleaner visibility on FTEs, cleaner visibility on what, if any, vacancy adjustment the board decides to make, and it's clear in the budget, because last year we went through a lot of conversations about potential vacancy adjustments, and it wasn't necessarily in the budget as a vacancy adjustment. We just basically funded them and left at a lower level. So it's just a lot of good budget stewardship and visibility, so everyone's operating on the same sheet of music when we're talking about how the department's performing its budget in the future.
And if there's significant capital costs that are needed, in my view, good practice would be to bring them forward and make the case for the cost versus padding your budget with extra funded FTEs, then just know you're gonna have money to do some capital stuff. And then with Workday, the report pulling is so robust. It's gonna be a lot easier for us to pull things on your behalf to look at spending. But if it's kind of buried in different budget categories, not accurately, we're not gonna have the best data possible. So I'd rather take 100,000 off the salary line and actually put it in the capital. If that's the plan in January, let's make that the plan and work also in the budget area that. So with that, we get moved outside agencies, but with just a few minutes left, you want to move to Scott Chesney and comp plan? You want to look at
You guys,
We'll be back.
you're still slated for another 15 minutes. We got slated till 11.
Okay, so the next would then be, did we put that on the sheet?
It was emailed this morning. Ron should have it as well as.
The outside agency sheet that you guys are probably more familiar with and you would like to be at this point. The one, so last week we ended at the Chase Youth Commission and we had a request to see what the city had done. They had been at 45,000 a year for, I want to say 4 years. I think we saw about a 5-year history. And this year the 2025 budget, they increased it by 5,000, went from 45 to 50,000. And that was, they're doing a biennial. It was for the next 2 years, it would be 50,000. So that was when you specifically asked about. I had penciled in a 30,000. Someone had suggested reducing it a bit, maybe doing a step down. So that's where it was discussionless and didn't have a decision.
So 50 and 50 or 25 and 25 is what the city does, because you said a biennial.
50 a year. They have
Okay.
100,000 in the budget.
Got it.
So they went from a 90,000, which I'm assuming is 45 a year, up to 100. So 50 a year, yeah.
Thoughts?
I guess the next step would be sending a letter with, is that what did you already send the Chase Youth Commission a letter saying that we may?
We're waiting for
Reduce.
dollar amounts to
Okay,
let them know. It'll be put as tentative because it is tentative until you do a budget vote. But giving them, in my view, giving them an actual dollar amount so they can plan their budget accordingly. Otherwise, it's gonna be Thanksgiving. And it's hard for them to make any pivots if that's gonna be necessary. So we had sent a letter like with the MAC, we have that letter drafted, we haven't sent it yet. Just letting them know next year. At this point, the plan is not gonna be able to do any funding. They can still call and make their case and work the process. Because nothing is final until the end, but at least lets them know this is kind of where we're starting at this point. So last year, we sent letters that said we're looking at needing to do some cuts. Please consider that in your requests. Here to be considered.
Which is why we're proposing and stating an amount.
I mean, I think we're in a situation where we have to reduce. I mean, I guess the question is, how far do we go? And the other thing that I think we want to keep in mind is, I mean, there are tons of youth programs, youth organizations across this community that we don't fund at all. So, I mean, I guess the question would be, you know, why is this the one that we pick? I mean, that there's lots of groups out there, and at some point in time, this one became one. The only one I can think of. I mean, I don't think there's this is the only one we fund. I don't know
We
why.
put quite a bit of ARP money in the different groups, but on a,
But out
on
of
a
our general
reoccurring
fund,
normal money.
year after year,
yeah,
this is the only one. So. So, I mean. I think 30 is a good start. Do we want to go beyond 30? at
I
this
think
point?
it's a good start. I mean, it's more than a 7%. But I know, in, you know, if in future years, if we can adjust it up again, we can look at that, but right now. We're looking to, you know, make cuts where we can. And so I'd like to send them a letter for 30, and if, you know, if there's something we need to adjust later on, we can look at it. But I do, you know, that they are an organization that is supporting youth and leadership and civic leadership. And there are other programs, like you said, but this one, it has been a partnership for a long time.
Your head nod of 30,000, sir.
34,000 would be more of a 7% cut, but
7 is for our internal departments. We're asking. This is external. This
Right.
is not mandated. There's no statutory,
yeah,
you know, requirement for us to fund this at all.
I think we could do that as a start.
3 for 30 on that one. I believe Commissioner Frank was 2 or 3. And then we've also talked about having Alicia come in to talk GSI and the appropriate people from the health district. Would you like to book both of them on the same day? Is that too much on one day? You can how long those conversations might take. And then how long would you like us to pencil in for, like 20-30 minutes, more or less?
I'd say 30 minutes apiece. Just kind of run through what their budget is. If we were to cut them X amount, what would that, well, I mean, I guess we would more ask them those questions, but I mean, kind of tell them to be prepared for us to ask them, like, if we cut you X amount, you know, what's your lowest priority of things you do that would most likely drop off?
So we'll invite both of them then to our June 2 meeting.
Is that all right, Commissioner Cuny?
Yes.
And then one other one we haven't discussed at all yet, there's a few to circle back to, our state and federal lobbyists. They're not really, you know, they're not groups that we fund the way like a Chase Youth Commission. Are you guys wanting to continue those contracts at similar amounts? Either, I believe the federal contract was a 1-year renewable for the next 2. Either way, they're both. There's clauses that we can make changes. Do we want to continue status quo on those? Do we want to look at any changes there?
state contract is up, right? For,
I believe I have one more, I think it went in, I know it went in, so it's one of the first things I worked on. So it was in the fall of 21, I think, to renew for 22 for 5 years. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I was pretty confident it goes through 26.
But they
Escalation automatically, currently scheduled on 26.
all have termination language in there for convenience.
For any
So-
reason.
You can change dollars, terms, walk away from it, in all of them.
Commissioner CUNY, you had your hand raised?
I did. I think we've seen that having the federal lobbyist has helped us immensely. Which was part of what we were, was part of what we were trying to look at is, yes, we're spending $100,000, but as we saw, we're gaining that in grants and dollars, working with our senators and, helping us as we go back to be making those contacts. I think that's, again, part of the cost of doing business. We can't do it all ourselves. So I think our federal lobbyist has certainly shown that it's been worth the money that we're spending because of the incremental gain that we're getting from it. But those are my thoughts.
I would agree with Commissioner CUNY on that.
We are talking with John just last week. Both senators have requested some backup detail on the stabilization center. Leads me to believe will probably be, and we requested 4 again, which was our original request in 25. You'll recall we were put in for 3, but then the CR, we ended up getting nothing. I expect we'll be back in about the 3 million level, and John has been helpful on that front.
Well, and I would say it's not just, on the true dollar amounts, it's also on the policy issues that, us having him help us navigate those issues too. With getting, I think, being back in DC, I think Commissioner Kearns, you and Commissioner French had several meetings with different, heads of different agencies and talking to different agencies that, those are the things that would be harder for us to be able to do on our own, that are making policy decisions that are, you can't quantify. So that would be the other piece of that. It's not just on dollars, but it's also on policy.
Didn't have agreement on the Fed. Any comments on the state?
I think it's, we've got his contract goes through next year.
26, correct.
Yeah. I think, he's definitely helpful in helping talk to legislators and get to people over there again. We had some pretty good wins coming out of Olympia that he was working with, and policy wise, again, just different bills that were coming up that he brought to different commissioners' attentions to actually help us make, try to help the legislature make better policy decisions. I think it's just part of doing business in today's world and necessary.
Just a question. I know we've got the contract going through next year. Do we have any sense of market for state lobbyists? What the city's paying, just anything to compare to? I don't know.
I have not looked that up. You're gonna have a wide range. You would need to truly see the contract, not just a dollar amount, to see what the work product is behind the dollar. Some lobbyists are really more in the weeds, helping draft legislation, offering amendments, studying the information more, bringing it back, how it will impact. Our current lobbyist is good at having his ear on the ground in the hallways, knowing what's going on, getting us signed in, more on the state government affairs side, less on the policy side. And so it depends on how a contract is structured to make a true comparison. We probably could pull the city easy enough for a comparison.
I'd be curious to look at that, but we clearly had a good year in terms of getting projects funded. and So
We
that's
did
been
well in
really good.
Olympia this year. And a million for Plants Ferry, 3 million for the stabilization center. I think I might be forgetting some other, there's 4 million off the top of my head. That's the best year since I've.
I think
PFAS.
I wouldn't sell
Defense
yourself.
is huge.
Don't forget that. I wouldn't sell yourself short. You had a lot of legislators reaching out for information about our asks. So I mean, you played a big part in that as well.
So it sounds like we're looking at leaving those displayed. So next time we're back, just advertising for the cliffhanger. We still discuss WSU extension. And we'll hit health district and GSI when they come in. And then AGC, I think, would be the last ones that we haven't. Just a quick look here. So a couple more on this sheet to go through next time we're together.
Sorry, which date were we aiming for health district GSI?
That'll be on June 2nd.
Okay.
I know Commissioner French had asked, when we had the discussion about the waiting room, the children's waiting
Yes.
room, and then I had asked if somebody
We're
could
still
see if
collecting
other,
info on that. So
yeah,
we
if
need
any
more
other
information
counties
on
do that.
one.
Okay.
We
I think Heather
don't
did
believe
look
there's
into it.
any
Yeah.
other counties.
Yeah, Heather did. What did she?
Kane County had been funding it prior to
Pre-COVID.
COVID. They stopped after COVID. They have not reinstituted the program. So it appears like the initial research that Heather's done is we would be the only county who provides funding to us.
So we are you on, Heather? I think she said there might have been 3 historically. Well, it might have been one of them besides King County if you go back many years. But yes, it has just been
She's not on.
King and Spokane. But Heather did some research on that. Do you remember any more, Commissioner Waldron? She happened in the office when Heather and I were chatting.
Just remember more about,
So the conversation with King County in the waiting room. They closed it pre-COVID or during COVID. I think that was the only other county, so.
and I don't know if they're providing, my question was, and I don't know if Heather knew this, was like, are they providing any vouchers or anything for
Anything at
people, for jurors to access? I don't know, maybe they have an alternative approach to accessing childcare, I don't know.
They do have an on-site daycare, but it's quite expensive. Personally. And, and we also need to do some chatting with Superior Court to kind of get a sense and the daycare people, like, if you're to continue at like our Friday usually slow, do things usually stop at 3 or 4 o'clock? It was just triggered my memory. Heather did say there's a few times they went past 5 o'clock. And they were willing to stay to finish out. And very few of them were for jurors. To Commissioner French's point, the vast majority are for family law
Family
cases. Heather gave the numbers, and I want to say like less than 5
I have them right here.
for jurors.
14 parents served on the jury.
For an entire
Three
year.
hundred and 15 went to Superior Court. The remaining went to juvenile district jail. And apparently we're also funding those for municipal court.
We do have a mechanism to charge them.
We have charge of that. Okay, so we do have a copy on that.
It's included in their rent.
So how many children, does that? how many
800.
Children they served?
800, 1,260 hours.
I don't know if those are any unique kids, some of them are multi-day.
But we'll bring, those are just some high level stats and that's this
I'll ask Heather to
information
join
that
us.
we're collecting for the fall conversation.
I happened to walk in when you guys were talking about it. We were brainstorming some different approaches, potentially partnerships with other funders, potentially. Or, could Vanessa Behan provide that service at their location, which isn't ideal, but
With a voucher to another daycare that already exists, would that be cheaper?
anyway, it's very challenging. I mean, I think that it's
Logistically.
yeah.
Very difficult, yeah. I bet you get a lot of stories about that's really helpful.
So.
I mean, as a
Yeah.
has a good reputation, leaving your kid with complete strangers, letting a little bit more confidence in their brand.
So you said 1,260 hours,
That's what it looks like, yeah.
so the 107th, so about almost $85 an hour. That's,
For 2 staff people, probably in the room for,
that's $85 an hour for
Well,
a kid to be in there.
Means that some hours there may not be a kid. So I mean, when you average it out over the number of hours,
But we're still paying
well,
$85 an hour.
for have it available.
no.
Can we reduce our,
107,000 divided by 1260 is 84.92.
for the hours that there's kids in there?
Yes.
Cause I mean, you're paying for
We're paying
to
for
be open
timers.
for whatever many hours, like 40 hours a week times however many weeks.
The staff costs are actually higher than that too. So you'll see,
We'll,
when we come back in,
we'll
we'll
create a
have all
one
this data
pager
for you.
for all that. So those are kind of the remaining pieces here, and I'll be another chunk of time on June 3rd. I know you guys love to see us come in because it's always full of such good news.
Counting more revenue.
Not yet.
We are speaking, the chair and Scott and I, with Liberty Lake this afternoon to get their take on the test. We'll be able to report back on.
Could be some more.
But that's
To
down
consider.
to less than $500,000 is the county share. We've thrown out, I think, a 1.6, 1.8 number. The lion's share of that actually comes from the fire district, which has a fairly high levy right now. So
And Liberty
our
Lake and then us.
first and fourth, if you put them in order by size, dollar amount size. So, thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Oh, Commissioner Kenny?
Yeah, as we talk to Liberty Lake, I mean, there's just a lot of questions on can they still do their lift without us doing a TIF? Just how all that works. Can we still do it? Can they reimburse us for our portion? There's just starting the discussion today with them. Because as we know with these TIFs, I mean, they weren't planned to go on forever. People use them as a future revenue stream. Instead of what the intended purpose was. So I think it's, as we're starting to see some of these come to an end, just like the Kendall Yards one, what is our role really, and what do we think, and how do we move forward? So.
More information will be bringing back your direction.
Good, thank you very much.
Commissioners, as we move into Scott's, just for a time standpoint, we do have 2 execs that are probably a total of 30 minutes. So if you have a hard stop at noon, then we need to give Scott a time frame. But if you don't have hard stops, you can go past noon, then give Scott till noon. So up to you all.
Scott, how much time do you need?
I think we can get the highlights probably in half an hour.
Good.
It really depends on your thoughts and questions as we go through these various topics. We wanted to leave, plenty of room for that discussion, not just to hear, here's what's going on, so.
Sounds good.
We've got some presentation materials for you, and we really have kind of a handful of disparate topics to talk about today, continuing on from some of our last discussions where we started introducing, most recently the EIS, before that some of the land capacity work going on. We're going to get past that, but I want to start with our kind of outreach and communication side. Next, please. Go next, please. Kind of the benchmarks, what we've done here in 2025, we've had 3 of the placemaking charrettes a total of 6, but 3, 2 in each of those. We've had 2 of the 3 rural community forums. The next one is tomorrow night in Deer Park, or tomorrow afternoon. We've produced 6 podcasts. We've had 2 media interviews. As we say, dozens of individual inquiries coming in. And we have our interested parties email distribution is now about 1,100 unique addresses, and that gets used every time we have any kind of event whatsoever. And then as of this morning, we've tracked our web traffic. In 2024, we had about 1,700 unique clicks into the comp plan site itself. So far in 25, we've had 1,600. So the traffic is increasing on the web. And so that's going on. So next, please. Here are some sort of more abstract parts of what's going on in terms of non-traditional activities, places that are not usually involved in comprehensive planning. We've sent invitations out to participate. We have sent invitations to have us come to them if need be. We've had only very limited interest in that so far. But we've also then looked at increasing some of our activities on the web, creating comments, public comments. We started creating a graphic style for the comprehensive plan, and then, excuse me, adapted the stakeholder list so that we've got regular communications with the public. Next, please.
Can I pause you?
Well, sure.
Where have you sent the invitations to? I was curious where that list.
I'll get you that list. I don't have it off the top of my head.
Yeah, any flavor.
It's a series of, we started with everything from cultural organizations to disenfranchised organizations, if we could identify them. And the invitation was, here's what we're doing. Would you like us to come talk to you, or would you like to participate? And if you'd like to simply be a stakeholder, give us your name. We'll include you on our list. But I'll get the exact list for you. So future activities, more on-site forums. We've had some specific requests. One from our northwest part of our county, bordering, really on the river with some of the development that's going on in our neighboring counties. We will be doing specific forums on agritourism, other topical issues that come up, including renewable energy. We're thinking about using some of your time, perhaps, with the county spotlight idea, maybe having an interview with one or more of the commissioners to talk about comprehensive planning. And then some of the more traditional things. We've had a couple of sessions with the home builders. We will continue to do that. Various Rotary clubs, things such, and then information tables at the various activities going on. And we don't know exactly how this works, but one of the things we talked about is can we put something about the comprehensive plan into a utility mailing that goes to everybody? I mean, what would be our most widespread opportunity to get something in front of people? So we're looking at that. We did a little bit of research on, can we create vinyl stick-on activities, stick-on things, drop them on all the county vehicles as they drive around the county and say, here, click on this and find out about the comprehensive plan. Next, please. And as we move in, one of the things that we've learned, and Commissioner French would probably remember this, Commissioner Waldrop for sure. The interest in the county comprehensive plan is very different than a city comprehensive plan. When we've had some of these early conversations, we had reached out to the Carl Maxey Center and their business association. And some of the responses back were, well, can you talk about crime? Can you talk about homelessness? Can you talk about things like, that's not what we do. That's the city side of it. And so we're learning that there's a little bit less interest in what we do because it's growth on the edges, for the most part. So we're trying to take that into account and say, well, how do we still get some information out? And that's really led to the rural workshops especially. The next few slides are related to our technical advisory committees that were created. There's a few of them working now, and there'll be a couple more as we move into this. Those are set up so that in addition to stakeholders, we have subject matter experts that can come together and talk about topics, and they're specifically related to the GMA elements for which we're responsible. And so they're, next please. Couple of quick highlights on the natural and rural lands group. You can see it has a pretty wide distribution of members that are sitting on that. This group is going through best available science right now for the critical areas ordinance. And this will also have a chance to talk about balancing what we're hearing from our rural constituencies as well. Next, please. And then another one that is new to all of us is the climate and resiliency element of the comprehensive plan that was created by the legislature a year ago. We've created a TAC for that. That has met many times. They are providing analysis. And this is something that's informing us as we go in, because it, again, is something no city or county has had to do until this latest round of GMA. And I've got a few more slides to talk about that as some of what we found later. So that's kind of a quick overreach of what we've been doing for communications. We're probably going to be shifting gears a little bit because we're finding out that our initial efforts were not as widespread as we thought, as I mentioned. So we're certainly open to thoughts and suggestions or questions on how that's been going. If not, we can keep right on moving along.
Can I just ask, how was attendance at the different like town halls that you had around the community?
The placemaking had between 12 and 15 in West Plains and Meade. We had 100 at East Valley, but that was predominantly because they were concerned about the Otis Orchard.
Yeah, so it was a different issue. Yeah, you told us about that.
When we calmed them down on that, only a few left, and the rest did stick around. The follow-up had about 15 or 16, so it's been limited. The West Plains very interested in water quality contamination more so than planning, and that's why we're going to have a specialized. We're getting together with Public Works to find out everything we can about water and water quality, and then we're going to go back out and talk to the West Plains on what we can do, what we can't do. You know, don't set your expectations for something that we can't deliver. So we'll narrow those down.
Thank you.
Do you see that when you have your different scenarios that are developed out of with the scoping of the EIS and having different scenarios for people to consider, do you think that will get more interest? Because then people have something to kind of chew on and give, say, I like this scenario, but this one I'm concerned about.
I would hope so.
Okay, because these initial workshops are really to get people thinking about different options for growth. Thinking like in the North Metro area, you had these workshops around, okay, well, how do you have access to services, but yet not in a highly dense environment? And you were looking at different options and getting feedback. But will those start to narrow down into more specific options that people can maybe, because you could do like a video about that, and people could fill out a survey once there's something that's A, B, C, D.
And we will do a lot of this virtually because we can reach a bigger audience and it can be recorded and reviewed later. I would expect it will generate some more interest. But frankly, the interest at that level will also be a lot of what you generally call the normal interested parties that follow planning generally, and now we're getting in more specific. They'll want to dig into that. And certainly those with specific interests like home builders and others, they're going to want to see those details. In some ways you could summarize what we heard at the community forums on placemaking, and we've got some summary slides to show you those results in a minute. But it was an awful lot of, we like it here, please just leave us alone. We don't want new growth happening around us. Please just leave us the way we are. So it was a kind of a message of, we're coming out to talk to you, but what we're telling you is we like it the way we have it. So we have to kind of work through that and still accommodate growth. Next, please. Ron's already had it. We're in the middle of our policy audit. And this is specifically looking at both the comprehensive plan, the CAO, the Shoreline Master Program, and our development regs, notably the zoning code and the subdivision code. And so it's a pretty widespread look at all of our pieces, but it's starting at the policy side, which is the comp plan itself. And so we've got, kind of these four principles to do this, which naturally we want to have our policy goals keep us in compliance with GMA, but then define and implement a vision for growth in the future. Next, please. And we'll just leave this up for just kind of a second. We're trying to say, much like a comp plan amendment has to meet a certain number of criteria to go forward. We've determined kind of these 7 basic rules or groups to say our policy should address most of these. And so the third one up there, improved policy implementation, that is the review of the development regs, zoning, subdivision, and so on. So the policy audit is substantially complete, and we will be able to share that with you next time. That will inform us as we go into that EIS process of what should some of these alternatives could be. Next, please. Next few slides are going to show the results of our placemaking workshops. And these are some kind of summary statements that we took from all 3 or all 6 of those sessions. And they were really, I would say, fairly enlightened. And not so much, I mentioned before, kind of the, leave us alone. But in looking at various scenarios, people picked some fairly interesting approaches that are not boring. Unfortunately, as we told you before, one of the reasons we created this approach was to say we should be building neighborhoods instead of subdivisions. And for the most part, our audience agreed with us. There were some concerns, typically, crime, encroachment in the rural neighborhoods. And then there were serious concerns about environmental conditions, specifically related to West Plains, but it came up in other areas too, loss of habitat. And there was some skepticism that the county has not been forthright in the past, and we had, I don't know if we've overcome that, but it was, we did hear casual comments being thanked for coming out and talking to us. Thanks for inviting us in to talk to you. So that's an ongoing part of government, frankly. Next, please. The top scoring in the visual preference survey, this was both the in-person and the online version. And on the left side, those are ranked from both the neighborhood and structural design from top to bottom. But the trail-oriented development and the neighborhood amenity or services and amenities both ranked very high. The independent village was seen as interesting, and that's important for us because as many of you know, in the county plan and in the Growth Management Act, there are these areas of local areas of more intense rural development or LAMERTS, the acronym, and those are in a sense rural villages. And so having this as a supporting element gives us a chance to talk about how we can preserve and enhance those. And then some of the traditional things that go into placemaking, streetscape, neighborhood design, and making those things happen. Next, please. So the principles that came out of this really are these 6. And we're going to go through each of them kind of quickly. Next, please. So for street connectivity, in the simplest sense, people reacted better to urban form that looks like the city. It has blocks, it has streets to connect. It was not, the forest of cul-de-sacs was not found very desirable in that development pattern. The pattern of an individual development that has garages around the perimeter or is walled off from the outside was also not very favorable. And so a traditional approach of being able to use and create a grid was something that we thought was kind of interesting coming out of it. Next, please. Second, and to a large degree surprising to me a little bit, was a very strong support for trails and off-road active transportation networks. It was surprising, I guess, because we just haven't seen it very much in the edges of our world. And what we're seeing now is we should be thinking about this because it connects to the city, it can connect to rural trails. Important to see that happen. Next, please. Less surprising, our placemaking groups all like the idea of having smaller integrated parks. The closest example we have here is the Olmsted Green and Kendall Yards, being a small thing, or Dutch Jake's Park on West Central. We recognize that while this is highly desirable, this does come at a cost. There's an operating and maintenance cost to this, unless it's a public, or unless it's an HOA or private park. And if it's a private park, then you have the potential of putting up signs saying, keep out, this is private, it's only us. So, this is one of the things that we'll have to talk with you about as we balance, as we go through this. Next, please. Streetscape design, we've got some details in here, but it's really, minimize pavement, provide pedestrian access, integrate street trees, and have some variety. The trees idea came up here, it comes up in climate, it comes up in kind of otherwise thinking. It's also one that we've had some very specific feedback from a couple of home builders being very pointed and pointing us in planning commission meetings going, are you going to pay for all these new trees? And we're saying, no, you are, if we do this, but think of it this way. You're creating really a additional value for your properties. You can probably have a better price point if you put these in. And also now, because we have this climate and resiliency mandate from the state, this will play a big role in terms of resiliency for residential development. Next, please. So neighborhood design then comes down to a couple of things. The next kind of 3 slides will summarize that, 3 or 4. And what we're showing here is the idea of more of a blended neighborhood where you've got different kinds of housing stock all within proximity to each other, which is very different than the zoning that most counties have traditionally used, which is a much more separating single family from any townhome, multifamily to apartments. This is a way of showing that you can blend these in a way that is pleasing for everyone. Next, please. And the other advantage of this sort of blended approach is it does provide sort of a version of the life cycle that older cities always had, where the old bungalows, the family grew up, they retired, they sold it to somebody who just had new kids, who wanted a small house they could afford, and that progression would go through a community. That doesn't exist as much when you've got all these big subdivisions the way it does. But if you think about building that in from the very beginning, you can have this continuum of housing stock that works for people. Next, please. Here's where we started integrating or bringing in the environmental design part of resiliency. And again, here's where the fire prevention, wildfire, or wildland urban interface issues will come into place here in the rural side. But you can even see some of the details that are part of other areas. The grid idea, multiple access points in and out of the neighborhood for safety purposes. Well, the grid does that, but a cul-de-sac doesn't. And then street trees for mitigating summer heat. Next, please. That all kind of results in this kind of diagram, which is showing that blended neighborhood off of an arterial, trails on the side, trails connecting to regional trails, the urban green in the center, variety of housing products, all within a neighborhood. And this is one of the motivations for exploring this in this detail came from Commissioner CUNY a couple of years ago, where we saw some subdivisions going in south of the valley that were taking full advantage of the allowed density requirements but they were going into an area that was built around the outside of it in 1 and 2 acre lots. And so it was a total disconnect in terms of urban fabric. Because the county had no incentive to design a better, or no requirements to do so. And so the approach we're taking is both that, or at least the one we hope to test and bring back to you through the planning commission and others is one of a carrot and a stick. The carrot being, there are amenities in here that can help you developers, builders have a better product, longer lifespan, better saleability. The stick is, yeah, it's going to be a development regulation. It's not going to be an option, or there's going to be some combination of it. And that regulatory scheme is something that we will ask, you to decide on when we're there. Next, please. The next two are.
Can I just-
Commissioner
Yeah.
Kennedy?
Oh,
Thank you. Yeah, that's just a big, as we know, as Scott said, just something that's been going on in the valley, that, we have a lot of these 1 acre, 2 acre lots, and then, open space next to it that are starting to get sold off. And we do have to, I talked to some developers, that are from outside the area that are here. And they said that other areas have that, where you have to kind of graduate in, to make it better for those people who, are already there and weren't expecting to have 8 homes per acre next to them. So I'm really thankful for you to be looking into this and, bring us back some ideas.
well, we're happy to do it, and it's a good reminder. We're not making up something that hasn't been tried in other areas and been done successfully in other areas. So pushback from investors is always likely if you change the way they're doing business. But what we're trying to do in meeting with them up front is to say, if you think about this, can you change your business model to do this? And so far, what we've heard is not outright opposition. It's more, we can probably make this happen. So cautiously optimistic that will work. In our rural forums, again, very, very interesting. And in this case, specifically the first one in Valley Forge, a handful, I think there were 10 people that were ultimately there over 2.5 hours. All of them were grateful that the county took the time to come and talk to them and ask, see, like, you're listening to us. And so we've went through this. We had some survey information. Next, please. And some of it, while we want to do things virtually and use our electronic tools, sometimes it's still the old school 40 years ago of planning. Put up an illustration board on an easel, get some sticky notes, and just let people talk about it. That old approach is very helpful. In this case, the statements, which you can't read on the slide, but they're essentially rural vision statements and things that came out of existing documents. We didn't make any of those up. We just took them from what we had. And we had them put a little sticky dot on whether they agreed or disagreed on that kind of 1 to 5 scale at the bottom. And you can see everyone that put something up there either made a comment or put something on the more positive side than disagreeing with it. And the one that's at the lower left that has some handwriting next to the sticky note, it's my handwriting, by the way. The sticky note says, you should be asking us to help write a vision statement because we are out here and we live this every day. And so I put a note there saying, whoever wrote this, give us a call. Yes, we would like to have you come and help us write this vision statement. So they read them and they're engaged. Next, please. This one will hit really fast. It's hard to see, but we asked them to identify where they saw community assets. And they were based on everything from environmental, aesthetic assets, business assets, and you can see the clusters of them in and around some of the loose cities. Next, please. And then this one is, I think, very interesting because we asked them to look at threats to viability. And while climate change has an awful lot of political baggage attached to those words. The people that are out here making their lives and their family lives in agriculture live that every day. And you can see that in the reflection of all of those dots over on the right side of this is, climate indications and resiliency is very important to their way of life. And that's not surprising. And it gets even more concentrated in that middle one, which talks about economic pressures of farming. Everyone is just right up there at 4 and 5. So, there's a lesson in here for all of us beyond planning, and that's that, our agricultural sector is at risk unless we can help that in some way. And so, the evidence doesn't support any conclusions yet, but it's certainly out there saying there's a call for help here. There's at least recognition that this is an economic challenge. And then resource degradation, one total no concern, and the others are, I think, reflective of the fact that ag lands all have challenges when you're using either fertilizers or waters or other things to work on. Next, please.
I have a question.
Oh, sure.
We have a consultant working with us on the climate element.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Is that different than the consultant who came to talk about the EIS?
Yes.
Okay. Do you-
Connected but different.
And what's the name of the two groups, just so I'm.
Cascadia Consulting is doing the climate work.
Okay.
They also wrote the climate rules for, they were the Department of Commerce's consultant to help guide the creation of the climate resiliency element. We are using them, and so is the city of Spokane. So we're integrating all of that effort with that climate side. Facet is the team doing the rest of the comprehensive plan, and the EIS is specifically their sub-consultant is Kimley Horn. And another reason for choosing them is Kimley Horn is also providing guidance to Commerce on environmental impacts.
I might be the only one, but it might be, I would be interested in hearing from Cascadia just to kind of update us on.
Oh, sure.
It was good to have the consultant come and kind of lay out pieces of it from their perspective. I'd be curious to hear from them personally. So something to throw out there. New area, obviously. I'm sure they've been working with Commerce. They've got a lot of good insight into how that's gonna look.
We will arrange that. They are also preparing materials for the first part of our Commerce work, and those will be wrapping up in the next couple of weeks. We'll send copies of that to everybody too for preview. And then we're going to transition right into the climate. We use that board with the rural areas about climate hazards. Again, they identified them clearly. It's not something that is necessarily political. It's just a reality of how their lives and lifestyle work. Next, please. So for climate and resiliency issues, there are 4 major topics that are being looked at, and these are kind of derivatives from the GMA side of the world. They all have relevance for Spokane County. Wildfire smoke. We all remember all too well the elk fire, the gray fire. Temperature change, stream water temperatures, and then precipitation, snowpack, and drought. Next, please. Each of these really quick. So for feedback at our community sessions, we looked at areas where there were these various hazards. They're hard to see on here because they're bigger boards, but we had people identify where they saw extreme heat, wildfire, flooding, and other concerns. Next, please. And then specifically, there are a few quick facts that Cascadia has uncovered in their initial work. Average temperature rises in Spokane County, how that may project out in the future, increase, 24 days above 100 by the end of the century. Next, please. Seasonal changes in precipitation, snowpack, and drought. And key factor here is again the trend line in the 2050 to 2080. 24% chance of less than normal precipitation, and that goes up, as we get to the end of the century. Next, please. Wildfire smoke, again, we know very well what this is all about. And the projection is it may see an additional 54 very high and 19 extreme fire days a year, more than what we've had. Next, please. Stream flow, it may sound a little esoteric, but it's important for us and as well as downstream. It certainly has fish implications and ecology implications. But it also has flooding and drought implications. Next, please. And here's kind of a quick timeline of where that is going. We've been through the launch here through fall 24 into 25. We're in the research parts of this, creating work with our climate advisory team. And then as the summer goes on, we'll be creating some of those policy refinements that we will come back and we will certainly be working with the public through the tax with them. We'll be briefing them with the planning commission and we will come back to you at your next quarterly briefing. Yes.
Well, I was just gonna say, you were saying that in some of the initial outreach to certain groups in the county, maybe they didn't see like a strong connection to the county growth. Or they wanted to talk about other topics that aren't really, they might be related to growth, but they're not part of one of these chapters per se. And so do you think some of this, it says through spring 2025, publish public facing materials, gather and integrate community values and vision, identify vulnerable people and places. So what's your plan for that piece?
There is.
I know you have a technical committee that's helping with the chapter.
We've created with our consultants a specific engagement strategy for the climate side of that. That document is in draft form now. I will send it to you and you can review that. And that's kind of that next stage of where do we go with this.
I just think you'll probably get some, I just can imagine that especially vulnerable community members, frontline communities, I think you'd get a lot of more participation in that type of conversation.
I agree. And we're also sort of hedging our bets with Ryan Hennig at Gonzaga, who's doing a lot of that climate study, particularly in underserved populations. One of the findings that came out is tree cover on the South Hill versus tree cover on the north side. It's very different. What implications does that have for your utility bill or your own health? And so he's got some body of work that we're trying to bring into this as well. But that would be a great place to try to engage through him and see, who he may have already brought into the loop. So
because you could use that data to kind of extrapolate to other areas of the county.
Yeah, in their case, they're studying things in the city, but the data is still relevant.
Yeah, I'd love to see that plan for outreach.
Get that to you. The next three are about the EIS and the environmental impact analysis. And you can see here, this is a highlight. You heard a lot of this when Clay White was here describing the EIS in detail. This is kind of summarizing some of what's going on. But it's, the statement in the middle, guiding planning by highlighting the impacts of environmental impact and looking at what are mitigation strategies to help you ultimately make policy decisions on how growth is going to affect the economic and the environmental part of that. Next, please.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yes.
On the scoping. So will the EIS be specific enough to look at like particular areas that are being examined?
Yes.
It will, okay.
I'm gonna get to that in 10 seconds.
Sounds good.
And it's in this calendar. We've sent out the scoping notice. comments on that scoping notice are due May 30th. We've held a meeting, as we said here, there were 28 attendees. We have sent a notice, well, related to the third one, development of alternatives. It's I think specifically what you were asking, Chris, and that's will be happening really kind of from now, but after May 30th. We've also asked all of the cities and towns that we're working with as well through the steering committee to provide, in a sense, to provide their UGA requests by May 30th. So far, we've heard from a couple that have no, they're going to make no requests because they can handle their growth. But that gives us a chance to narrow down what those alternative areas may look like if we know that the city of the valley, for example, feels like it needs, 500 acres of new land for some reason, and we'll have that number. What we will be doing, though, is also scoring all of the letters of interest that we received from landowners that were interested in being in the UGA. And that will go into a matrix. And then we will look at those, as we call them, the UGA polygons. But for example, Moran Prairie on the south side of the city of Spokane, or the West Plains, or the East Valley. All of those will be looked at individually with any attendant lands that were requested. And then that justification will be put together on does it fit? Does it meet the criteria? Is it needed? And if it's needed, does it fit? So it'll be done polygon by polygon. That will also show where lands would be in a sense swapped rather than growing the UGA. We anticipate the UGA as a total acreage will probably be less than it is today, but it'll be in different places. For example, there are several hundred acres of UGA bounded lands on the southeast side of Cheney that are all scrub lands. They're really not buildable. Don't know why they were put into UGA 30 years ago, but that 108 acres in a sense might show up as being attached to a higher growth area on the city of the valley. So we're looking at ultimately shrinking that, but probably moving it around to meet growth patterns. And so that will come back to discussion for July, the steering committee. We will be able to do that.
So sorry, as you're doing that, you're also looking at though the accessibility of water, utilities, fire and,
That was fine for you.
okay, yeah.
No, we are. Yeah,
Cause that really, in my mind, you'd start with those things to decide where you might want to move growth around. Where do you have that accessibility and a plan to be able to extend
that's exactly.
utilities or have access for schools and parks and those types of things?
That is exactly.
Rather than like being driven by like where a certain piece of property is. Of a property owner, it's really looking at where those access to resources and growth, the needs of growth are.
You say there's a slide for this?
Yes.
How about we get to that slide?
All right,
So anyway, this is where we're going for the EIS. The EIS does bring a lot of this together. It's kind of it kind of forces the issue of focusing the comp plan earlier rather than later. And importantly, those alternatives, we want to come back to you June 16th at a strategic planning meeting and be able to share with you what we see as a range of alternatives and scenarios. And that will include that first draft of where these growth areas are going to look like. So here you can just quickly see the timeline. Next, please.
Can I pause you on the timeline?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Does that timeline does not assume our extension, right?
It does not. And for the moment, we've left it here as
Give ourselves a breathing room.
yeah.
Okay,
Almost a contingency.
okay.
And part of that is in an ideal world, because the counties all have different responsibilities under GMA than the cities, we really should almost be on a 6-month stagger from the cities. The cities all ought to be 6 months ahead of us so that we've got a better sense of where they are, and then we can start doing our planning. And so now that we've got this extension, we kind of put that into play, that we can wait a little bit longer on the cities because we're not panicked to get the whole thing done in June.
Okay.
So it's very great. So here's kind of where all of that comes together on our next slide. And it is, back to Amber, what you were saying, it's capital facilities planning. This is something that the county corrected in 23 when we found out that the CFP was not connected to the comprehensive plan, and that was one of the reasons we were out of compliance. The board fixed that, and and what that means is we in planning work with many of our fellow department heads now to remind them and show them that projects that are being proposed, and obvious ones, public works, parks, things like that, they have to be tied to goals and policies in the comprehensive plan, and the funding sources and uses have to balance, and those uses have to be in the CIP as well as the CFP. And the challenge is, you were listening this morning to funding outside agencies like the health district. Well, health district has a standard in the capital facilities plan. It's a level of service of the board previously created of $2 per capita. If a funding decision is made that would reduce that level of service, you have to either change the level of service or increase the funding to meet that level of service. And the highlighted part of this statement is to remind all of us that if the level of service shrinks or can't be met in some other way, that will affect the development capacity of future land. So if you cannot pay for the infrastructure to develop a piece of land over, maintain that level of service over time, the county has an obligation to shrink its urban growth areas or shrink its developable land to meet your levels of service. So these are not just abstract, plumbing decisions that are made. And the challenge is, again, not sometimes obvious things. Capital facilities to most of us are pretty straightforward as opposed to personal property or other things. But in the GMA world, it includes school districts, it includes fire districts and fire district apparatus, it includes water districts, a little more easy to figure out. So we have to be able to say, and we do meet with school districts quarterly. If we're growing into an area, not only do we have the traditional capital facilities to meet it, but the school district is able to handle that capacity over a 20-year growth period. So it is a huge multi-layered approach to it's just back to that scoring opportunity of each piece of land. So this is where people that don't think about comprehensive planning kind of have to come back into the tent a little bit and say, we need to have all this in our world. So I will quickly wrap up. Next slide, there are two slides are our roadmap. You and your predecessors saw the first one of these in 2023. We've passed 24. We're into 25. We're doing what we said we would do in 25. Next, please. We're still on track for 26, and we do have the extension in place, which helps us enormously. Next, please. And then this is just some ideas on where we think we'll be ready to come back in a third quarter discussion. Although, as I said, we'd like to add the June session to come back and talk about EIS alternatives a little bit more specific. And the last slide is just the tentative calendar.
The June session you were looking at was?
I think it's the 16th. It's a Monday strategic plan day.
See, well, there's. Oh, right. I was looking at July. You were talking about the July steering committee meetings on the 16th, July 16th. You're talking about
Yes.
June 16th. Got it.
Yes.
Okay.
That's
Scott, I've got one quick question. So on the earlier slides, when you showed the imagery of sort of the grid patterns in neighborhoods, you referenced that opposed to cul-de-sacs. I mean, to what extent what we adopt in 2026, to what extent does that restrict some developer that say they hypothetically, they pick up 100 acres, they want to build a neighborhood and they want those cul-de-sacs. They want something that differs from, you know, say the grid pattern or the thing that we're hearing in these placemaking, that they want to do something that doesn't match up with the desires of the, you know, 12 to 15 people that attended the placemaking. So, I mean, to what extent does this dictate what they can and can't do?
It wouldn't dictate at all.
Okay.
What we would present to you for consideration is a range or a spectrum of trade-offs. So if a developer wanted to do, let's just say a very minimalist approach, they could do that, but this is the range of density you get. This is the thing you get over here. If you are willing to put in more amenities and do other things, you might get a density bonus. You might get the ability to use tax increment financing to put in some of the kind of expenses up front and recover the cost later. So there would be an incentive package to get further up here. But if somebody really didn't want to do that, there would be no outright prohibition unless you decide to create a hurdle of some kind. So you have to get to this point.
Okay, and the reason I add, I mean, you use as an example, the cul-de-sacs, I mean, maybe it's a way, I mean, where they put the roads in, where they punch them, they see they can get more homes into a set amount of land. I know, you know, many developers, that's what they look for, is how can I maximize the number, but also, I mean, it's, when you talk about cul-de-sacs, I mean, people still buy homes on cul-de-sacs. I mean, whether people say they like them or don't, when they're built, they always sell. So
That's the point. We're not suggesting that there's one pattern that is absolutely right for Spokane County.
Yeah.
We're saying that the patterns we have right now, we can expand. We can provide different opportunities. And part of the argument for builders that I've seen in other areas is if you can do, you know, 10 lots here and sell each home for $200,000, maybe you do 8 lots in this pattern because you've got more open space, but you might be able to sell the homes for $300,000. And so the density gives you one bottom line number, but if you've got a higher quality product to sell at the end, you might make that up by having the amenities.
kind of goes against the concept of promoting affordable housing though,
Well, that's-
at the same time.
That's something we'll be back with you in June to talk about in the EIS,
Yeah.
because it's a big deal. If, for the county to provide affordable housing, well, first off, right now, no housing is technically affordable.
No, I get it. I was just poking fun, but no, I get, there are so many
Yeah.
layers upon
We're gonna
layers.
have some
of
ideas
GMA
for you
with that.
on that
Yeah.
as well.
Mr. Jordan?
I was gonna say, interesting to see the results of the placemaking effort or meetings. I'm not surprised to see some of the pieces around like trail oriented and obviously the parks and outdoor space. There's the GSI poll coming out today, which I got a preview of on Friday. And just it asks people in a scientific poll in the county, you know, what do you love best about the region? And it kind of lists different things, you know, closeness to family or jobs or whatever, affordability, all the different things that you could love about your community. And it was interesting to see that the number one answer was the natural beauty, outdoor spaces of the region. So that's kind of lining up with what you're finding in some of those exercises when people think about what do I want my neighborhood to look like. So it might be good to take a look at that survey if it kind of feeds into your efforts, because it is a scientific poll.
That's great. We'll welcome every data source we can get.
I'm sure you don't have the budget to necessarily do scientific polls, but it was interesting to look at that.
Yeah, it is, and you know, it's interesting because we did ask folks at the beginning of the placemaking session to, you know, what do you like best about this? And they use their phone, and we said, you know, put it down in 1 or 2 words. And I think we showed you earlier that the consultant created the word cloud out, and it had things like open space and comfort and safety. So it sounds like it's tracking very much in line with the GSI.
I was also gonna ask one more if I could.
Sorry, Vice Chair.
I noticed, I was reading over a list of the housing related bills that got passed this year. and there's a big long list. There's several about condos, new insurance options for condos. A couple that I was wondering about whether it connects at all with this process or if it's more of like a permit level issue rather than a map, but there's one about requiring cities to adopt rules for converting existing buildings into housing and commercial and mixed use zones. And there's another one limiting the number of parking spaces cities and counties require for housing projects. So for those ones that seem to be regulation map related questions potentially, I'm just wondering if those connect this process or
They
not.
do. They do. In the earlier version of the GMA deadline bill, the 26 counties, if you were finishing in, June 30th, you have 6 months to adopt the new regulations coming out of the legislature. When this was extended, that 6 months was wrapped into it. So we need to consider that as part of the plan itself. Now, a lot of what was passed in the last session was city only. Didn't affect the counties, but some of it does. The parking requirements do, but they're also related more specifically to Transtory and the development, which doesn't extend very far into the county itself. But we're tracking all of them. The legislature thinks of itself as kind of a statewide planning commission these days, so they're down in the weeds in our world.
And then there's the bill on reducing permit timelines.
Yes,
So obviously
We're
that's
under
more of
that.
an operational.
we're under that now. With, I guess, maybe an outlier of some kind, but we're under those deadlines now. But that's mostly on Jordan's side of the shop.
Okay, good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, and we will continue the discussion as we go along.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Scott is saying.
We have the
one-
logo
Oh,
discussions to Walter
Oh.
discuss here.
That is the next bullet on here. Sorry.
I didn't even look at that. I'm sorry.
Comprehensive plan limited discussion. Sorry,
Uh,
who's gonna lead off on it?
I sent, if it's what I think it is, we sent to Bass an updated version of the logo that we showed you last time for comment.
So
I'm sorry, I didn't bring anything to put up on the screen for you. So
I think Ron has two items from me. So I missed the first pass of this, so apologies if that created any confusion. I did want to reference back to the board's adopted 2016 logo usage policy. And if any of the board members, I know we have 3, 4, 1 online today, haven't seen that, I'd be happy to share it with you. I think the first question that needs to be revisited is whether or not the board desires to allow the department to have its own branding and logo. And once that question's answered, I think it will help us understand whether we should proceed down this road of an independent logo or branding or not. I'll just give you a couple of quick pros and cons to help inform your deliberation.
While he's doing that, let me be clear though, we're not talking about a department logo. We're talking about just the comprehensive plan. That's one document.
Yeah, and for our purposes, they're one and the same, because we do not create, the current board adopted policy doesn't allow for departments to create logos for time limited initiatives or programs. It mandates the longstanding county courthouse logo, which we're all familiar with. It does say though that alternative logos can come before the board. But the first question that has to be answered is whether you think this particular initiative needs its own distinct identity. Some reasons, I'll give you the pros. I just created a little pro-con list. If you think that a separate logo can help differentiate the planning process from the county and other county functions like wastewater treatment or many services we provide, or if you think it might help residents recognize and engage with the process, that would be one reason to do it. If you think it will make the outreach efforts more visually appealing, memorable, or will do something to encourage more community participation, if you think the brand is more inclusive in that way. If you think it's well designed and it will reinforce the importance of the planning process. I know we've heard today, some people find this boring. Logo and branding can add a little more sizzle, to a product. A separate logo would allow for more. Separate logo would allow a separate logo and kind of creative branding around it that aligns with our main county branding. Might help people get more in a visioning space, you know, we're talking about design and things like that. Rather than being constrained to the more traditional county logo and county government, which is what our logo represents. And then just symbolically, if there's something about sustainability and climate and other elements, you know, climate change that you really want included in this logo, then a logo could do that. Growth, sustainability, you know, different colors. The county's colors are standard colors are red, white, and blue. This one uses more of a rainbow color approach. Most of the primary colors are represented in it, the one that has been presented. Reasons against using or employing a separate brand that I made: consistency and recognition. So we do have a unified logo that reinforces trust in all government initiatives that we currently have. If you ask people, what's that logo on that truck driving by? It's a public works truck. That's the county logo. We use the county logo at county events, like last week's parks, for you know, trust and credibility that the speakers who are at the podium are there representing the county or this event. It's not just some people, you know, in a park with a tent who are using a karaoke machine. Avoiding confusion. So separate logos, when you get into evolution, you get people who put them on flowery backgrounds, who stretch them, who distort them, who put a circle around them. Our logo's unbounded, which means it really is just an architectural representation with a word mark. That's what the word Spokane County is. It's called a word mark. The logo doesn't ever appear separately without the word mark. That is, it's either the logo and the word mark or nothing. You know, Spokane County itself isn't just a mark. It's the courthouse and the mark that make the logo. Costs and resources, in addition to the confusion that can be caused, you know, people might wonder, is the planning process or the comprehensive plan independent from the county government? Or is it part of it? Like, who's paying for this? Is this like a corporate entity, for instance, and it's corporate money, or is this taxpayer dollars? Or is it a nonprofit, right? Kind of the public private confusion. Cost and resources. So as I don't know how much Scott's gotten into, but anytime you're creating a logo, you got graphic design work, you got time and money. You know, there could be a case that maybe that's spent on that money's better spent in that effort on actual planning efforts than on branding and the immense amount of spend that's needed for a brand to be recognized and gain public awareness. Just think about how many times you see the county logo on all the things that it's on and the costs that go into that. Short-term use, this one for me is pretty determinative in my thinking. It's a periodic process, the planning process, separate logo. You know, is this something that's just going to go on a shelf or go in a report and kind of gather dust? In which case that would, in my mind, or is this going to be a document that's alive for 20 years? People are going to constantly reference back to and remember, be memorable, like Spokane 74, Expo 74. People remember those, you know, that branding. But there was a lot of, again, funding that went into advertising that brand. And then transparency. The reason that I think I wasn't here in 2016, but you adopted the logo policy is independent electeds sometimes want their own logo. Let's say a key, for instance. Individual departments may get, you know, some creative juices flowing and say, well, we want something that looks more like water, or we want something that looks more like the Palouse. You know, we want some, and really the county logo that we have represents the county government. Doesn't represent the place we live. There's no sun in it. There's no, you know, mountains. There's no river running through it. It really is, when people see the courthouse, they associate that with that Spokane County. And we hope that they associate the value for their taxpayer dollars with that brand. So that's what we say when we say one county, one brand, is there aren't any derivative brands or other logos that have been approved today. There are a few that were grandfathered in 2016, a few departments and a few programs that were doing something separate and had put a decent amount of investment into to make it worthwhile. So ultimately, I think it really comes back to the pros and the cons. What's the board's goal for branding this initiative, if any? Do you believe it will help or hinder the engagement around the plan? there's something about this particular branding and logo that you think will enhance the planning process? Or would you prefer to maintain the unified visual identity that we currently have? I would say that I think using alternative brands within the guidelines of the policy, I know policy was discussed a lot today. I made Scott aware in March of the county logo usage policy. It was unfortunate some of the materials got into the wild and live before the board had a chance to consider this proposal. But ultimately, I just want to be clear, and the policy dictates this. I have no enforcement capability to tell a department to continue or quit using this. We're here to coordinate and to guide and to assist, but it's really the board. And the policy does say for violations of the policy, up to including budget reductions or termination. So I think when the board adopted this, they're pretty serious about there will be no deviations from this. That's why you've seen other departments like Doug Chase and others be very consultative and Scott in this process. But nothing is to be used under your current policy without explicit approval from the board. And so for any departments listening, you know, when they contact us, we inform them of the policy to be sure you read this and know it. So that's the first question I think the board needs to decide is whether or not you would like to approve the planning department's use of a logo for the comprehensive brand plan.
Did you, I think the last time we discussed this, we asked that everybody kind of gets together with your group. Did you guys come up with a version that has the courthouse and
Yes.
Spokane County?
Yes, I sent that to Scott. I don't think he was to Mr. Chesney. I think his reply was no thanks. He responded back with a version of the logo that is very similar to what you saw last time. It says Spokane County across the top and then across the bottom. I think it says Vision 2046 or comprehensive plan. So the direction I'm looking for, and I think the decision the board again needs to make is whether or not you would like to approve an alternative branding scheme or framework for this, a style guide, if you will. And then, as I said earlier, kind of our collective efforts can stem from there. But the consultation is pretty straightforward. There's a policy. The department violated the policy. The department is now here asking for permission. And so, you know, whether you all take an enforcement action, it's up to you. But it's pretty straightforward based on the policy the board has adopted in the past.
Can we see some options? I mean, what's out?
I think the options are.
I mean, I think we saw the one last time that Scott brought that had all the
So just to be clear,
colors.
sounds like you're supporting an independent.
I'd like to see the one that you made with ours.
Sure. Ron, can you pull it up? I think I emailed it to you. It's actually, Sharissa created it.
Okay.
Should look very familiar.
I mean, I assume but I don't know what words you put under Spokane County, I guess. Just comprehensive plan. Oh, Vision 2046. Okay.
It could say comprehensive plan. There's enough space there. It could say plan 2046. But it would be red, white, and blue, which are the county's colors. So this is very similar standard branding for a department. Typically, it would be a word mark. In this case, we went for a rectangular box. So this would be within the current policy or the current framework. This wouldn't necessarily be an alternative. This is something any department could contact us and ask us to customize for them. It typically would have the word mark instead of Washington, it would say Public Works, or it would say Board of Commissioners, for instance.
So I mean, in the presentation we just, the Scott that you just gave us, it had an image of what I assume is a flyer, the one that said the Rural Lands Community Forums. I mean, it's got, it's got this logo on there in the corner. So I mean, it seemed to work.
We had proposed in our first conversations with Pat that we would use both of them on a document. So the courthouse logo would be there to establish the legitimacy of Spokane County. And the comp plan would have its own bug, just to identify it as the comp plan.
I mean, it's just my thoughts. I like the courthouse. I like the professionalism of this look. But how it's what all our other departments, I mean, I don't know if I'd use Vision 2040. I
Yeah.
may just put comprehensive plan or comprehensive plan update. I mean, I know you wouldn't want many more words than that. I mean, many more characters, but I mean, I would think more either comprehensive plan or comprehensive plan update or something. Was that
Plan
Yeah.
2046.
plan 2046 maybe? I mean,
I think we have another version that says Plan 2046, Ron.
okay.
It's pretty, like I said, I mean, it's very straightforward. It is the traditional brand. It's within the current policy. I don't think this would need approval just for awareness. What would require approval is the alternative that's been presented. And, you know, that's at your discretion if you think you want some more time to think about it. I did hear earlier concern about this discussion holding up the launch of the independent URL, Spokane County Plan 2046.com. But I think I've been able to visit that, and I think it might not be linked to the county website, but I think it's already live, right, Scott? Spokane County Plan.
It is accessible. We're not publicizing it, and it would be reached, when it's ready to go live, it would be reached through the building and planning webpage. It wouldn't exist independently.
And the page there I have up now, it does have the county's logo prominently displayed versus the bug, which had been there previously.
I don't know, I mean, maybe you could do something more stylized, like more of a cursive font or something for plan, comprehensive plan 2046 or something. Just, I mean, I think you could take it and make it a
So
little bit more interesting.
Unfortunately, I think our plan spells out fonts as well.
unfortunately, yeah,
But is that to do a branding around a specific initiative? I mean, I think that I really feel like we're getting caught up between a logo and then the branding of a particular Spokane County initiative. This is a particular initiative that's time limited. So I'm looking at like Yakima, they had like a title, they had a brand for their comp plan. So, and I don't know if they did good or bad with not using like their official logo or not, but what has been our tradition around different initiatives of the county?
I think,
'Cause I can't imagine there hasn't been some along the way where we're like promoting a certain safety issue or we're involved in a multi-year process. I don't know.
so the policy does stipulate co-branding with outside entities, so other agencies, but I was looking at Martha Liu, who's our institutional resident expert on past programs and initiatives. I can't remember any that have existed in the time I've been here. For instance, the ballot measures have used the county logo. We haven't created something separate for those. Those are bigger programs and initiatives. There is one third-party collaborative around waste ambassadors, which has to do with recycling. That came up recently. It's a partnership between the city and the county, where they wanted something to represent our partnership together. But nothing that's internal to a department or to the county and is used externally to represent our program or initiative that I'm aware of. Everything has fallen under the county brand.
Is there any budget for branding, this kind of marketing work beyond?
It's wrapped into our overall communications and public participation policy.
So there is.
Well, it's a part of the budget we put together for the commerce grants, yes.
So do we have a consultant or somebody?
No, we did this in-house.
Okay, so we have money for it. We just haven't hired the additional expertise that
We
could
have-
be hired.
For the branding, no, we've done that
Okay.
all in-house.
Yeah.
the web page that, we're setting up for the plan, that was an outside consultant, a faculty member at Eastern who did that for us.
Website. Okay.
That hasn't gone live. yet.
Right, yeah. Well, I don't have strong feelings, but I appreciate we need to follow the policies that we have. Personally, I would lean a little bit more towards sizzle on this and having a more independent outside look to it, but I also don't want to bog down in lots of, because you could get 5 different opinions on whether the logo's good or bad. I appreciate the effort on draft 1 of the logo. I just thought it was a little too busy and just wasn't quite what I envisioned. So maybe in the interest of making things simple, it's better to kind of stick to the basics of what we have. So
one middle road to consider, Sharissa has suggested, is that, it's been referred to as a bug or a logo. One middle road to consider would be primary use of the county logo, but there can be other style elements outside of it. So the mountains, the cityscape, other things could be incorporated into like headers as a graphical treatment for the area. And it could say comprehensive plan with the inclusion of the county logo. So that we're not constraining, what people think of when they think of planning, because other than having an architectural representation of a courthouse, this doesn't get us a lot of sizzle. But, treatment of people on bikes, treatment of some houses, some of these different other design concepts that could be graphically integrated as a brand. But that the county logo, it doesn't compete with our identity. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
To use our marketing guru over there, Sharissa's language.
I like that.
And we
idea.
could do that. That wouldn't slow us up at all.
Well, and that, I'm looking over at your screen, those colorful images at the top are nice. Like if you
Yeah.
could integrate
Totally shows
some
what
of
it's
those
about.
graphical images at on the header of the website, and then also any materials that you produce or send out. You could have the logo, and then you could have the mountains, you could have the trail, you could have the houses, you could use different colorful, it looks like you do have some sort of artistry that you've created some sort of imagery for the top of those community forums.
I think it was clip art. I think we just found that.
Those are icons.
I don't know. I think it's important that we have this to make it clear who's doing the work. It's Spokane County. It's Scott's team over there. It's that other logo didn't necessarily make that clear that it's these Spokane County people. We don't want to be confused with, Spokane County Library District, Spokane County Fire District, there's a lot of entities that have Spokane County in the name, but this is the Spokane, like to Pat's point, the Spokane County government. So I think that's important that you guys who are doing the work get the credit for it. So,
We can easily adapt.
I think Pat makes a good suggestion that you could, as the idea of having a visual brand for this project could have some themes that are kind of graphic themes built into the documents that aren't the logo per se. That could be a good kind of compromise.
Sure.
I was just looking up like Kennewick, they have their logo. And underneath they say comprehensive planning. And then they have like theirs is called Building Blocks of the Future. Yakima's is We Are Yakima, Comprehensive Plan 2040. So there tends to be the use of comprehensive plan and the date. So people kind of know what we're talking about, and then they have kind of a theme. So that's kind of what I was looking for, is that. And so, but you don't have to have a separate. But having some imagery, having some design to it, I think is important for I was gonna say pizzazz, but what was the word?
Sizzle.
Sizzle,
That's Pat's
okay,
word.
sorry, lots of Z's.
You're supposed to sell the sizzle.
Cause I do think the colors in that.
But the Kennewick That's their city logo.
Right, but I
I mean,
think
that,
that's,
that's not a new logo. That's,
right,
that's
that's
just-
what I said.
yeah,
I
it's
said
the
they use
same-
their user logo, and
it's the
then they
same
had a
deal.
comprehensive plan, and then like a little slogan. It was more like a slogan around it, rather than a new logo,
We could do that. That's
like Yakima had, we are Yakima. That was their, wow, okay, go Yakima.
OT.
But the idea that it's like inclusive and people are involved is the thought around it, so. But I think the colors that you're using, even if it was clip art, I like the colors. They were really pretty, and that you've been using at the top of the different materials you've been using so far. They're appealing to the eye.
Idea. We can adapt, so. We will do so.
But in the meantime, if it should stop, you could still just publish the website with the logo and all the content that's on there for
This
the
won't-
public.
This won't hold us up at all. Worries.
Mr. Cuny.
So yeah, I guess I like trying to find a compromise, right now. So, but I think it is important to distinguish as Commissioner Kern says, that it is the county and it is us, in your department doing the work and putting all the effort in, that I think sometimes otherwise it gets lost that it's some other group doing it. So I think we can find some compromise to what our, using our logo and identifying it as the comp plan for 2046.
We agree.
Super.
All right,
Case closed.
all right. Any very quick miscellaneous, because we do have 2 executive sessions that I think we need to get to today. So miscellaneous, anyone?
Thanks, Scott.
No? Oh,
Oh, I emailed Pat about the messaging around the aquifer protection area. Are you gonna send it, can you send that out to everybody, like the updated?
Yes, I think I sent it to while you guys were in the meeting.
Okay,
And if I could get feedback on that by, I think, Wednesday, we're gonna use that fact sheet as the stock language for the web page. And so we could have the web page live by Wednesday if I get feedback by Wednesday. We incorporated your suggestions from last week, the ones that were made in the meeting,
okay.
around toxic, around clarifying the fee, 30 for rural, 15 for urban. There were a couple
And there
other,
was something around current or
Yeah,
future toxic
Yes.
concerns.
yes,
Yeah,
current
right.
and emerging and current or existing, yes, that's all been in there. You should see it.
And then the conversations with the other jurisdictions will be ongoing about if they want to link to,
Yes.
we should probably link from my suggestion is we create the main page and then the other cities link off of it and they can add their own specific detail around, what things they want to fund separate from the county. Anyway, that's just my thought. So there's like a one landing page for when the voters are looking for information.
And my hopes to do that like Wednesday afternoon is to send out the fact sheet and say the board, this is the board's messaging, let's work together.
Yep, take a look at it, everyone, take a look at it today. I think we definitely have time to go over some stuff under miscellaneous tomorrow morning, so, and deadline of Wednesday, so. I'm gonna hand it over to Matt, if you wanna get us queued up for executive session, the purpose and who you want present.
Yep, thank you so much.
And length of time.
2 pending and potential litigation items under RCW 4230-110. 15 minutes each, so a total of 30 minutes, no final action in either one. First one, the board, Scott, myself, Ashley, Pat, Jeff, and Summer. Second one, the board, Scott, myself, Kyle, Jeff, Pat, Jim, and Jasper.
Okay, we'll begin these executive sessions at 12:30. At the conclusion of these executive sessions, we will be adjourning for the day. And we will be back tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. So no anticipated action today as a result of these executive sessions.